a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman the Geek, presented by Blackstack Brewing, the family-owned and operated friendly neighborhood liquor now available in the liquor store near you. Place also home of a Twins Daily opening day party. Check that out at twinsdaily.com. I'm John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
This is our season preview episode.
Woo!
Both for the Twins, but also the American League as a whole, which means we'll be doing our over-under picks as well.
That's right.
The main thing is we made it.
Through the offseason. Yeah.
And it wasn't, even by the Twins standards, it wasn't a good offseason. It was boring on the player front.
Yeah.
And it was annoying on the ownership front.
Right.
You know, there I guess were some positive things like the streaming situation, maybe, although they're still not on television as we record this, which bothers me every time someone asks, "How do I watch them on TV?" And I think I could tell you, but the Twins would have to kill me.
We've got 5 days for them to announce
We'll
now.
see.
Bringing it right down to the deadline.
It's out of my hands at this point. I'm not my brother's keeper. It's their problem now. We've tried to explain it as best we can. We've gotten yelled at it as best they can.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk AL Central. We're going to talk Twins preview. And we're going to do our annual over-under picks for all 15 American League teams, including the AL Central and the Twins. So it should be a pretty packed show. But first, unfortunately, we got a significant injury to talk about. Remember way back 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago when we were like, boy, they're pretty healthy at the beginning of camp.
Yeah.
Other than, Brock Stewart coming back from shoulder
Honestly,
surgery.
I think we were there 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Well,
2 weeks ago we were, I think.
But this also
certainly
happened
in the
last
Patreon.
year.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, you're right. Certainly on the Patreon when we had Phil Miller on, he was like, it's been a pretty good camp. So,
Let's
not a
blame
lot
Phil.
of injuries.
We'll blame Phil.
It was 4 days later.
But this is what happened last year when they were going along pretty well. It was a little bit more middle of camp instead of end of camp last year, I guess. But then Duran got hurt. DeSclafani got hurt. I'm probably forgetting someone too. Kirilloff? Thielbar, yeah. That one I blame on us inviting him on the podcast. He literally got hurt like 2 hours later. But now,
basically half the bullpen got
yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, Duran was the big one, obviously, but and now it's Royce Lewis. Unfortunately, their very first Twins.tv broadcast with Corey Provis on the mic and Audra Martin on the sidelines and Justin Morneau and everybody in their new graphics package, which I actually like, by the way, so far. It's much cleaner than Bally. I really felt like the Bally, and I know it's still Wolves and Wild, so people see it still. I still watch all the Wolves games. It was so like overwhelming at times because they got the score bug on the bottom, but then they got like the crawl with all the other scores, and they got gambling stuff. And this is a lot more simplified, so I'll give them credit for that. But
it also leaves room for sponsors to come in.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we'll see on opening day. The game itself is a small box on the corner. Yeah, you're right. Why am I? Yeah, you're right. I'll wait. John's always like, you're so pessimistic about everything. I say like one nice thing. He's like, hold your horses. But 2 innings into their first broadcast, I think they were interviewing Rocco Baldelli about managing injuries and like the roster and the depth and stuff. Royce Lewis hits a grounder to third base, tries to
beat it
hustle,
out,
which was his first mistake to try. Never try in life. Gets about halfway to the bag, reacts as if someone shot him in the left leg, kind of hops his way to the base, and I'm thinking, oh God, Achilles, I don't know what. He leaves the game. They announce the next day a moderate left hamstring strain. And, there's mild, there's moderate, there's severe. Last year, on opening day, after hitting a homer, Royce Lewis then hurt his quadriceps going from, he was rounding second on his way to third. He pulled up there. And that was what was deemed a severe quadriceps strain. And he ended up missing 2 months and change, 2.5 months.
Came back early June.
Yeah. So moderate is good news relative to that on the hamstring, although hamstrings, and I mean, really all these muscle injuries, soft tissue injuries, leg injuries, and Lewis has had in addition to the back-to-back torn ACLs, has just had so many leg, muscle, soft tissue, and core injuries that I just wonder, like, is this all kind of stemming from the torn ACLs?
Yeah, who knows?
I mean, you'll never know, I guess. But it makes sense that, like, you have a weakness then that you're compensating for. You never get back to 100% and all that stuff. Either way, you know, they haven't given a timeline on this injury, but because they didn't give a timeline on it, I just went and looked up, you know, previous examples in the last 3 or 4 years across MLB of position players who were diagnosed with moderate hamstring strains. And I would say they kind of revolve around plus or minus 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And Jorge Polanco for the Twins 2 seasons ago, 2023, had one, you know, midway through the first half of the season. And I think he missed 6.5 weeks, something like that. And he returned right before the All-Star break. So I think until we're told otherwise, that's my baseline for what to expect with Lewis. And they're not going to be incentivized to push him just because, A, it's still relatively early in the season, but more than that, B, his history with this thing is like he's the last guy you want to push other than maybe Buxton or something like that. But even Buxton has had an incredible number of injuries, but Buxton has more of chronic knee problems, but also like getting hit by a pitch or
breaking, following something off his foot.
His are more, you can sort of point to the injury and go, that was an acute, you know, he ran to the wall.
I think early on in his career, that was more the case. Later on, it was more like, okay, well, he's got a bad knee or he's got a hip thing going on.
I remember he broke his toe. He got hit by a pitch.
Well,
he missed a bunch of.
That's right.
And I'm not saying these are better or worse or anything, but Lewis is just post the 2 torn ACLs, which are obviously significant in 2021 and 2022. That's huge. That's why he's much slower. That's why he's bigger. That's why he's playing third, not short, etc. These are all just kind of base running.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do with that. And I know everyone's reaction is like, has he considered stretching before the game? It's like, yeah, they're doing all that. I'm not sitting here telling you I'm guaranteeing they have the best approach to this stuff.
We're not saying, and we're also not saying, oh, it's his fault that he's got these hamstring injuries or their fault that he's got these soft tissue injuries seem to be recurring. It's just a thing that's happening.
It's really troublesome. I don't know how to. I mean, we've already kind of seen it with Buxton, where they finally, after 4 or 5 years of planning on him playing almost every day in center and then him never doing it and filling in with the Jake Caves and the Gilberto Celestinos and just guys who shouldn't be starting in center field, they finally 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I guess, were like, let's go out and get Michael A. Taylor. Right. And that worked out well. And then last year they thought they were doing something similar. Let's go out and get another veteran guy who started there in Manuel Margot, but he was a lemon. Mm-hmm. And then this year they did the same approach, which is let's go out and get Harrison Bader, kind of a defensively oriented, still relatively young guy who started a lot. That's purely those 3 years in a row are an adjustment that the Twins were kind of forced to recognize they needed to make, because Buxton just is never, even last year, which was for him very healthy.
Right.
He still missed 60 games or something like that. Right. So you need a better caliber or a more experienced or someone you're actually willing to turn to in center to be his backup. You can't just have a typical backup. A typical backup might be Austin Martin or Deshaun Kersey, who I'm a believer in both those guys to some extent, but they've had to pivot away from a typical backup because of that. They're going to get to the point.
When the possibility exists that they're going to play 100 games in that position, you have to go right. Now, fortunately for the Twins, with Royce Lewis, they have a guy that has played close to 100 games in that position, right? I mean,
they have a couple guys.
How long did Jose Miranda? How many games did
74.
Jose Miranda play there last year?
Jose Miranda actually played the most. He got the most starts at third base on the team last year. Right. Almost twice as many as Lewis. Like I said, Lewis got hurt on opening day, missed 2 months, and then came back, hit well. Then had the adductor injury, missed a month, came back, and then hit horribly down the stretch. He had actually had a pretty good spring, 12 games or something, which is unfortunate. He had looked pretty good and pretty healthy before this injury. But yeah, I mean, I think
the problem isn't that they don't have a decent backup for Royce Lewis. It's that they don't have a decent backup for the backup, which is that nobody else they didn't go and get a big bat to fill in a DH for when Jose Miranda ends up having to move to third base.
Yeah, I mean, they had planned on not removing Miranda from the third base picture. And in fact, I think if Lewis were healthy or healthy-ish for him, he was still going to sit once a week,
Sure,
probably.
I think so too.
He was going to DH once or twice a week. And it wouldn't have been surprising if Miranda, at least early in the season, got those starts.
Yeah, got a couple starts every week. Right.
But bigger picture, they had certainly started to treat Miranda or plan for Miranda more as part of the DH mix, some first base, some third base, as opposed to last year. He was like, okay, he's your backup at third base. That changes now before it really is even underway. And like you said, they don't really have an obvious DH. It's not like they have another guy that they signed. I mean, they barely have a first baseman. They paid $1 million for Ty France, who had a good. I don't mean it that way. Like
but that's fair. Just so we're clear, like Miranda is serving as the insurance policy both for Royce Lewis's injuries and if Ty France turns back into a pumpkin,
and he's part of the DH mix.
Right. Yeah, right.
He might be their best option.
Or turns back into Cinderella, too. Like if he doesn't turn back into Cinderella, like it's been a few years since Ty France has been that player, right? So. We'll see.
So that's the dilemma.
Yeah.
And they also have Willie Castro, who can play some third base, but I think he's part of the mix at second base. And they also want to keep Castro available for that super utility role. They have Brooks Lee, whose best position defensively is probably third base, but he had been competing for the second base job.
And now he's got a sore back.
Yes, now he has a sore back.
Right.
And you might say, who cares? Guy's got a sore back in spring training. But he got back spasms in the middle of camp last year, and it ended up he had a herniated disc in his back, and he missed 2.5 months.
Right.
20 as a 42-year-old with back problems, I can tell you that a 24-year-old with back problems worries me. And it's not just sore back; it's herniated disc, back spasms, that sort of thing. That's worrisome too. I mean, there's certainly a possibility that a day or two from now, the Lewis thing or the Brooks Lee thing, is no biggie and he's ready to go.
Sure.
Although he hasn't exactly lit it on fire all camp either.
Right.
But I think his defensive skill set and versatility made him very likely to be on the team, particularly with Lewis out of the picture now for probably at least all of April. But if he's out too, then you got some issues in the infield because then Eddie Julian is taking on probably a big role at second base. Castro then is your backup shortstop in addition to playing second base, third base, some outfield because Lee, I think, if healthy, is going to be your backup shortstop.
Sure, yeah.
And then you're playing Miranda a lot at third. And, like you said, he played a lot at third last year. He can play third. I mean, he's played hundreds of games at third, but he's not a good third baseman. I mean, he's passable there.
Sure.
But the question then becomes, if we assume Brooks Lee's healthy, what is their best or maybe like least bad defensive alignment? Because what you can't do, in my mind, is play Miranda at third and Julian at second regularly, especially with Ty France at first, who I don't think is a particularly good first baseman, because then you're below average at 2 of the 3 like non-first base spots in the infield.
Sure.
And you don't have a Carlos Santana at first base to rescue them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious to see how many throws get skipped and bounced that we think
Santana
last year. Santana probably would have made that play. And so that's where the infield is. They have depth, and that's why we didn't really view the infield itself as like a priority this offseason. It turns out it wouldn't have mattered. They didn't really add anything this offseason, hardly. But we thought, all right, they got Julian, they got Miranda, they got Lee, they got Castro, they got some other guys in the mix there. But you remove Lewis before the games start, and you possibly have a compromised Brooks Lee,
and everything.
Nobody has that much depth to withstand that right away.
We broke down the whole Royce Lewis injury and what the roster machinations might be, etc., on Wednesday on the patreon.com/Gleeman. Probably hour 45-minute episode, and I bet you an hour of it we were talking about.
There was a lot of moving parts. Now that was pre-Brooks Lee,
and that was even pre-Brooks Lee
injury.
Talk. It's Saturday right now. We expect. I mean, usually the Twins make their final roster designations by Sunday or by Monday morning. Like we usually find out about it Monday morning, don't we? About the week of things.
You're giving them too much credit.
I think it's
but it'll
Tuesday?
be Tuesday or something.
Okay. Well, so anyway, we're going to
break camp at some point. They come back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Monday and Tuesday are the last 2 spring training games, and then they break camp. They're back for Wednesday's media day, and then Thursday is Wednesday is not media day here, but Thursday is the game. So
Yeah, in St. Louis.
So we will be doing a Patreon like Tuesday when we get a final roster to kind of talk about what the Twins have done and what they finally decided. We've only got about 2 more days for them to figure it out. So, and part of that depends on what they find out regarding Brooks Lee's back as part of that. It also might depend on Brock Stewart.
Yes, Brock Stewart, who had a hamstring. It looked like a knee initially. This was a week and a half ago or something like that. He's coming back from August shoulder surgery. Got a late starting camp, but through a handful of times, velocity looked outstanding. Stuff overall looked good. Maybe some issues throwing strikes, but he looked like he was progressing really well to being ready for opening day. Then he asks out of a game. The trainer comes out with it looked like a knee injury, and I'm thinking, oh God, he tore something or whatever. Turns out hamstring.
Okay.
They deemed it minor. He didn't he was throwing pretty quickly after that, but it does sound like his status is in question for opening day, not because it's a significant injury, just because, when you suffer any sort of injury with 12 days to go before camp and you're already kind of behind because you're coming back from surgery, I think they're going to be pretty cautious with him. And I would agree with that stance.
Sure,
because, I mean, even if he were not compromised by this hamstring, I would want them to be extraordinarily cautious with him for the first couple of months of the season. No back-to-back appearances.
Just given his injury history for the last 2 years, right?
And 12 years.
And I mean, there was a lot of optimism when he got the surgery that he did get taken care of in October that this was really going to get past. Oh, in August.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
But yeah.
But in October, when I talked to Twins officials about it, there was a lot of optimism that they thought they got it. They thought they figured out what had plagued him for the last 2 years. And by the way,
it looks like they were right.
Yeah,
he was throwing 97.
Yes, absolutely right. You're absolutely correct. Yeah. And that, leg injuries happen sometimes regardless of how clean the rest of the delivery and mechanics and such are. So
yeah. And Michael Tonkin is out for the beginning of the season with a shoulder injury. So that the Tonkin injury opened the door, I would assume, for Louis Varland to be a full-time member of the bullpen. But now
they're talking about almost openly.
Yes.
We've finally been waiting for that, right?
He's only thrown 30 pitches was his max pitches. So it's obvious it's right in front of everyone's face. And he had a really good camp so far. Right. So I like that. I think Varland, we've talked about him endlessly over the last few weeks, but I think Varland has a chance to be one of their better relievers. And so the Tonkin injury is unfortunate for depth purposes, but it opens the door for Varland to get a clean look here. And I think that's deserved. And I think ultimately that'll help him. Then the question is, well, if Brock Stewart is also on the IL, let's say, to begin the season, which is they haven't announced yet. I'm just thinking is a possibility because he hasn't gotten back into game action. And as you said, the season's about to start. Right. I don't know who makes it. I mean, it could open a spot for the Rule 5 pick, Iverson Castellano, but he's really struggled. He had a horrible outing last time out. Yeah. He just has struggled to do the one thing you can't do if you're trying to make the team as a 22-year-old AA guy as a Rule 5 pick, which is you can't walk guys. Yeah, you have to throw strikes. Right. They have to, in the lowest leverage role, which is what he would be taking, which is kind of mop up, long relief, multiple innings. The one thing you cannot do, you can give up runs. They're not counting on you to be great. You're coming from AA. The one thing you cannot do is pitch.
Not get close to the strike zone.
Is necessitate another guy finishing the game.
Right, yeah.
In other words, they bring you in the 7th inning of a 10-2 game, and you walk 3 of the first 4 guys you face, and you're not going to get 3 innings or 2 innings. Right. Then they have to go warm up Louis Varland, or they have to go warm up, Justin Topa. That is the last thing they want to do based on that role. So I'm assuming he's on the outside looking in. Now that could change. They could just say, let's bring him and kind of react in real time during the season with our needs, because they do like him. And it's not clear yet if the Phillies are open to the idea of trading him so that they could do that. If Stewart does begin the season on the IL and it's not Castellano to take that spot, I'm kind of assuming it would be Scott Blewett. Although they also have a lefty, Miskevitz.
I don't even know.
I'm botching his name. Yeah. But a lefty they signed to a minor league deal who's pitched for the Mariners and some other teams in the majors. He's still in camp. But Blewett, I mean, we've seen Blewett the last year. I think Blewett is a major league reliever. I don't think he's a guy I want, pitching the 8th inning or something, but he's a major league reliever. He throws strikes. He's got good stuff. They like him. He re-signed on a minor league deal. So I think I would probably assume it would be him replacing Stewart, but it could also just be a waiver claim. It could be a trade. Like when you're talking about a last minute bullpen spot, there's a lot of stuff that could.
I was trying to think if there's any, guys who they're sending down to St. Paul as starters that they might get into that role for a few months. But I don't think they want to mess with any of their sort of prospects. It could be a Dobnik for that matter.
Yeah. I mean, I think if Stewart was expected to be out for a month,
right,
maybe they alter their plans. But if it's going to be a week or two behind, then it's like, all right, let's put Blewett there. So I don't know. We'll see with that. So yeah, injuries. There is no such thing as a healthy baseball team, and certainly not a healthy Minnesota Twins baseball team. No matter how healthy they look, they will come up with injuries, and they're not alone there. There's been a lot of injuries across baseball.
Ask the Yankees
this spring, right? But the Lewis one hurts. The Stewart one hurts, but in my mind, entering camp, he was a question mark because of the shoulder comeback.
Sure.
Now he erased that in my mind as a question mark, but the fact that he may not be ready for opening day would have been a possibility 6 weeks ago. Just the reasoning for it is a little bit different. So that's where they're at heading into camp. I think the Lewis injuries definitely opens the door for Mickey Gasper to have a bench spot.
Yep.
From there, not clear to me how they find him regular playing time, but he's intriguing. I mean, he had a good camp.
Yep.
He's a switch hitter. He's done really well in the minors over the years.
He's been getting a lot of time at second base and first base in there.
He could be part of the DH mix if Miranda's playing a lot of third base, so that sort of thing. And then, the other thing is, if Lee's healthy, if Lewis and Lee were healthy, which they are not, but if Lewis and Lee were healthy, I think Julian might be in St. Paul.
I think
from want him to play every day standpoint. It's possible they still could take that approach with Julian, even if Lee is only healthy and Lewis is out, which he is for a month. But I think the Lee situation creates a little more need for maybe second base help. Julian can also play DH if Miranda's playing third base.
Yeah.
But it's a possibility that if they were healthier, Julian would be going to St. Paul, and in which case maybe Martin would be on the roster in his place.
Maybe,
which gives you some more outfield depth, I guess. So, there's some moving parts here. This is...
I felt like we had a pretty good handle on this roster, I think, 2 weeks ago, and now with a couple of injuries...
Now we know nothing.
Yeah, certainly I don't know that either of us would have thought Blewett would have had a chance at making this roster even a week ago.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks
So that's where we're at. They set the rotation by sending down Zebby Matthews and David Festa as expected, so that means it'll be in order... Pablo Lopez, who's going to face Sonny Gray on opening day, which is fun. Also, I read an article yesterday from our St. Louis writer, Katie Wu, who does a really good job. Sonny Gray's velocity is down to 91 miles an hour. He's given up like 12 runs in his last 2 starts, and he's starting to talk about needing to make adjustments based on like his stuff being down. So that could be a very interesting matchup on opening day.
It could be a very interesting.
And so then it'll be Pablo Lopez on opening day for the Twins, followed by, in order, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, Chris Paddock, Simeon Woods Richardson.
Have they announced that, or is that just we can tell from the rotation? Yeah, I mean, okay. I'm just wondering if they put out the probable pitchers officially.
Who knows?
But I mean, right now, based on what we are seeing in spring training and how they're lining up, that's the rotation.
That's how they're lined up.
That's right. And we should just also mention they also sent down, Zebby Matthews. They sent down Dave.
I mentioned that.
Okay, all right.
You should listen to the show. John's got Cajun breakfast in his ears.
Oh my God,
from
so
Uptown
good.
Diner.
Uptown Diner's the Cajun breakfast.
It's funny. I used to get that too. That must be like the fat boy meal. You know what I mean? Like a guy comes in, he looks at the menu, he goes, "That's what I'm getting."
That was I think the time you were getting that when you were living in Uptown, it was also the hangover meal.
Actually, I was skinny back then. You're right. It was a sop up, whatever you did the night before.
Oh God, that's the best.
That's true. Before we get to our over-unders and our team previews and our Twins preview,
let's talk about our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. We talk about how good their beer is. I've been getting notes and social media tweets thanking us for recommending Black Stack Brewing and trying out, say, their local 755 New England IPA. You can try it out now, too, and you can try it out for free. That's right. Twins Daily is having an opening day party there. If you go to Twins Daily and sign up beforehand, you can just show up without signing up beforehand, but you don't get a free beer that way. You want to get a free beer, go to Twins Daily, sign up beforehand so we know you're coming. We'll reserve a free Black Stack brew for you for opening day parties. Twins start playing
Thursday.
This Thursday.
The actual opening day. Not
That's right. Yeah, not the home opener. The actual opening day.
Upcoming Thursday.
3:15.
March 27th.
Yep. I think the party starts at 2:30. Game starts about 3:00. We'll be there probably 2:30 to 7, maybe later. Sometimes we stay later.
Yes. It's on 94 and 280 basically.
Yep. Or if you can't make it there, just stop by your local liquor store, because one of the nice things, because their beer is so good, they have switched to a new distributor, and that new distributor is now making it available everywhere from all over the state of Minnesota, from Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo, at your local liquor stores. You don't have to go to specialty beer stores anymore. Go get yourself some Black Stack Brewing, or stop by their tap room on 94 and 280. Even better yet, do that after you've signed up to do so at twinsdaily.com, and we will get you a free Black Stack beer.
Okay. Let's get into our preview mode here. And we'll talk about some of the injuries and Twins stuff, roster stuff, when we preview the Twins momentarily, but that'll be at the end here. Here's how we preview teams. And here's why we preview teams.
Yeah.
We always tell the same version. So like 10 years ago, John and I were arguing on the show, probably and off the show, about the Detroit Tigers. And this was in the era of Jim Leyland was the manager, and Justin Verlander and Miguel Cabrera, and they were the powerhouse team for, I don't know, half a decade in the AL Central, made the World Series, all this stuff. And we were trying to preview the AL Central one year, and one of us said...
We spent the offseason just kind of arguing about whether or not we thought the Detroit Tigers were going to be good or bad that next year.
And we're previewing it, and one of us is like, I'm really low on them this year. Like, I'm pessimistic. I think this could be the year where it kind of starts to crumble for them. The core is getting old. And, blah, blah. And the other one of us was like, no, I still think they're easily the class of the division. Like, I'm still pretty high on them. I think... And we got to the end of the argument, and we realized, I think we both picked them to win like 92 games.
Yeah, we'd both been
same win total.
I think we had the argument. We're both putting enough caveats in sort of our statements about them that I finally said, okay, let's just say what number of games we think they're going to win.
Same number,
and it was like 88 and 89 or something like that. 89 and 90.
From that point forward, we decided. You can still argue about dumb stuff, clearly, on the show. Clearly. That's a necessary element of the show. Otherwise, it's a 12-minute show. But we were going to preview teams by looking at their over-under win total as deemed by, odds makers, Vegas, whatever. Right. And we were each going to go on record at the start of every season and pick over-under for all 15 American League teams so that we can actually determine who is high and who's low on these teams, or do we just agree on these teams? And so that at the end of the season, we can hold ourselves accountable. Now, unfortunately, last year, we were both horrendous at this.
Yeah.
But I will say...
It's gotten worse and worse as we're going on. Because I think we
used to be really good. And I had a couple years in a row where I went like 13-2, 12-3.
Yeah.
And I got a little high on the hog, I think. Is that a phrase?
Maybe.
It is now.
High on the hog is not, that's not what you mean by high on the hog, but that is in fact the phrase. High on the hog is like living richly.
Yeah. I thought I was king of the picks.
Okay.
I was on my high horse.
That's it.
A lot of animals
you were on your high horse.
On.
That's right, yeah. You got the proper farm animal now.
Thank you. I've heard that before. Wait a second. Wait a minute. So that's what we're going to do. With an added twist that we added in, we're going to make over-under picks for all 15 American League teams. And we're going to talk about each of the teams as our kind of big picture preview. But then within that, 2 teams per division, so 6 total teams out of 15, we're going to kind of emphasize those picks.
Yeah, those are the ones we really believe
We're going to double down on those picks.
Right.
These are the ones that even if we didn't have to pick all 15.
Right. These are the ones we'd actually bet on.
We feel strongly about.
Right. The other ones we'll do because we have to. We feel like it's just as part of the preview. But
although I will note, in good years and in bad years like last year, there's not much evidence that the ones we feel strongly about have a higher winning percentage
absolutely correct.
Than the ones we don't. So keep that in mind. But before that, so we're going to go over this. John is going in blind. I'm the one who looked up all the over-under stuff.
Right.
John likes to try to guess what the over-under is. That's his...
What the Vegas over-under is.
Yes.
Right.
I've used... BetMGM or something, I don't know, or DraftKings, I forget what I use, but it's all the same at this point. That's the other thing that we've noticed over the years of doing this for a decade. There used to be kind of some fat left on the bone of like projection systems like Zips for Fangraphs or Baseball Prospectus has Pacoda, and there's some other ones. There'd be a handful of teams out of 30 every year where you'd look at the Vegas over-unders, you'd look at like Pacoda, let's say, 10 years ago.
Sure.
And there were 4 or 5 teams where there was a difference of like 3 or 4 wins. And so you go, well, these are the layups here. These are the ones where Vegas thinks one way,
right,
and kind of the analytics community thinks the other way.
Right.
And the analytics community tended to be more accurate on those. But what's happened since then is Vegas now has shifted gradually further and further from kind of the old school odds makers.
Because the bettors have gradually made that shift as well.
And so now, first of all, I know someone, I'll say this. I previously, 10 years ago, was offered a job at a Las Vegas casino working under someone who a few years earlier had been hired away from Baseball Prospectus to work at that casino.
Yeah, got it.
So what I'm pointing out, but believe me, as a person who loves to gamble, it was very intriguing at the time. But I say that as a way of saying that the same people and the same methodology and the same analytics and the same data that's being used to come up with Fangraphs projections and Pacoda Baseball Prospectus projections are also now being used by Vegas.
Right. Yeah.
And also just the idea of Vegas, it's not really even Vegas anymore.
No,
it's DraftKings and
right.
FanDuel and all this stuff.
Online stuff.
But they're all one and the same. It's the same type of brains using the same type of data. And so now over the last, I'd say 3 to 5 years, we've noticed this in a big way when we try to do our picks.
Right.
There's no more difference. Like there's no more, oh wow, Fangraph says this and the odds say 3 wins different. They're plus or minus a win almost across the board. And so maybe they took away some of our layups. Yes. And made it more difficult and exposed us for the frauds that we are. Or we just had a bad year or two. But so we're going to factor all that in and we'll talk about what they're projected to too. And then the last thing I wanted to say before we get to the teams was we don't pick NL teams, but I wanted to note something as I looked at the National League odds and projections and stuff, which is, and I'm not going to give away too much info because I don't want to spoil it for John as he tries to guess the American League teams. But what I will say is there are 4 National League teams that have a higher win total than any American League team.
I've seen this. I haven't seen this necessarily with the Vegas stuff, but I've seen it with the power rankings overall. Like people are all kind of
now. Obviously, the Dodgers are the easy one.
Phillies,
yes.
Mets,
yes,
and
same division as the Phillies and the Mets.
Oh yeah, of course the Braves.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I think.
Yeah,
but it's also. I looked that up after I had gone through and written down all the American League over-unders because I got to the end of the American League, the 15, and I thought, I don't think I've ever seen a group with totals this low. Like, there's usually at least 1 or 2, the Yankees or Houston or somebody in almost every year we've done this that have a really high over-under, and that just doesn't exist this year. The top 4 teams... or 5 really, the tied for 5th is also National League. The top 4 or 5 teams, at least according to odds makers, and like you said, even that's just as the general consensus opinion, are the National League. For the Twins' purposes, it's an interesting thing for the AL to be kind of wide open in that sense. There isn't a dominant team. I mean, the Yankees made the World Series last year, but they've lost Juan Soto. They're going to be without Garrett Cole, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of a wide open hodgepodge.
Seems like the kind of thing that you'd want to take advantage of by investing in a team that's about an 87-win team.
Is
that?
that?
To see if you get them up.
Hold on, is that Justin Ishbia? No, it's not. So just keep that in mind as we go through the American League. This is the most closely grouped or like sort of center grouped, regress towards 500 group of American League teams.
All right, I think I'm going to have a couple high ones then.
That's okay.
Let's see what
So yeah. Okay, let's talk about. Do you want to start with the East or the West?
Start with the East.
Okay. Do you want to start with the top or the bottom?
Start with the top.
Start with the top.
Don't we usually start with the top?
No, but that's okay. I don't care.
We can start with the bottom.
I'm
happy with the bottom.
You drive.
I'm not sure which of the 2 teams that are at the bottom. I'm going to guess the team at the bottom is the Toronto Blue Jays.
All right, well, I guess we're starting at the bottom. American League East, the lowest over-under, John is guessing the Toronto Blue Jays. You are correct.
They had 74 wins last year. The Pythagorean was 73.
Right. What that means is, you're going to hear John mention that, Pythagorean record is essentially taking a team's runs scored and runs allowed and translating that to an equivalent record. For instance, if you score 750 runs and you allow 750 runs in the previous season, your Pythagorean record would be 500.
Yeah, it'd be 81.
And the reason that John cites that is because it is more accurate in terms of predicting the next year's record than the actual previous year's record.
Right.
So in other words, if a team went 85 and 77, but they were slightly outscored, their Pythag record, which would be like, let's say 77 and 85, would more accurately portray their odds the next season than the other one. So that's why John brings that
up. All right, so Toronto is about the same in both, 74 wins, 73, but
which is usually the case.
Which greatly underperformed last year's Vegas expectations of 87.5. You want to go through sort of who they had? They had a interesting offseason. They kept striking out on a bunch of the big names.
Same as the year before.
But they got decent names as sort of backups. They got, instead of getting Bregman, they got Santander. Instead of getting,
they tried for Soto.
They tried for, well, that's true.
They tried for Shohei the year before.
You're right. Instead of Bregman, they got Andrew Jimenez. They added Jeff Hoffman. And they ended up, and they added Scherzer, right?
Yes, but he's already hurt.
Oh no!
So yeah, they signed Santander, who's a 40 homer guy from the Orioles. Jimenez, they traded for Gold Glove second baseman from the Guardians, who Twins fans have seen a lot. He's taken many hits away from the Twins. Yep. Jeff Hoffman, who was an all-star reliever for the Phillies last year and was actually in Twins camp as a minor league signing 2 years ago, and they cut him loose, which didn't end up going well for them. He got a big contract to be their new closer, and then, like you said, future Hall of Famer Max Scherzer, but he's already kind of banged up, I think. They didn't really lose anybody, but the one kind of storyline for Toronto is this is the last year under contract for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette, the nepotism duo, who have both been excellent. And it sounds like Guerrero turned down like a $500 million offer for them. They might still come up with a deal before opening day. Who knows? And so they have, but those are their two of their best players. Right. Two of the better right-handed hitters in the league. And I'm not saying they're going to like trade him in the next week, but that does add some weirdness and some drama when your kind of two building block guys are possibly on the way out if they don't get him signed to an extension before opening day, probably. The other thing with them, I think, Kevin Gausman has been very good the last couple years, but he's shown some signs of maybe some raw stuff decline at the top of their rotation. Old friend Jose Barrios
is there,
has bounced back well for them after a rough stretch for them initially after the trade. I look at them. They're an interesting team. Like, obviously, they were in the playoffs 2 years ago. They played the Twins. They took, like you said, a big step back last year. They feel like they're one good bat short. Like, why didn't you guys get corner outfield help, DH help? If you look at kind of their projected starters in that front. Which is strange because they always have plenty of money and they were shopping in the most expensive aisles and whiffing for Ohtani and Soto and all that. But in general, do you want to, should I say what they're projected?
Or
do you want to guess first?
I'll guess and then you tell. My guess is, basically my thought process was, their Vegas views them as a 74 win team that underperformed a little bit last year, so they're not going to go quite down to that level.
Right.
And they also got a little bit better in the offseason. They added a few pieces, so I put it at 80.5.
Okay.
Is that 78.5?
78.5.
Yeah.
Which strikes me.
I figured this one was a little high.
So Fangraphs projects them for 83, and Baseball Prospectus projects them for 85. I agree with those projections. I think they are kind of in the Twins range as a above average, but not good, like not very good, just sort of solidly above average. Now that division is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to lose games in that division. Right. And everyone is projected to be 500 or better. That ain't going to happen.
Right.
We saw that last year. That wasn't going to happen. But Toronto, I feel like people assume they're kind of window is closing because of Guerrero and Bichette and all that, but they're still intact for this year. They still have some real star power. I think they have some pretty good depth in the rotation. I don't think they're like going to win that division by any means, but 78.5 seems real low to me.
Yeah, my personal guess on them. So here's how I did my sort of personal guesses. I basically started out with, okay, are they a team that is 500, 5 games above 500, 10 games above 500, or 5 games below 500, 10 games, or in the case of the White Sox, how far down are they?
Yeah,
right?
We'll get to that.
Right? We'll get to that, right? And them I put as, I think they're a 500 team. Like if they get off to a good start, I feel like they could push their chips in and really go for it. And if they don't, I feel like they could bail early and fall apart completely.
Yeah.
But a 500 team is 81. That is what I just went, like then I try to go, okay, are they a little better than that or a little worse than what I did? I think they're basically that. So I went with 81 wins as my guess on what they're going to be. That's above.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take the over.
To me, and this probably assures that we'll be wrong about this, this was the most obvious choice out of 15 teams for me when picking the over-under. Toronto, 78.5.
Huh.
That is really out of the 15
Well, now
teams.
you're making me want to go under. Because somebody, like you said, somebody has to be the worst team in this division.
Yeah.
Are they all going to? Is nobody going to finish below 78?
Well, here's what I also say about this division. We'll see this in the next 4 teams. I don't think it's that good. I mean, it's good, but it's not what we think of when we think of the AL East.
Right, yeah.
Because there, as we said at the beginning, there isn't any American League team that strikes me as that fearsome right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and so it used to be Yankees were going to win 95 every year, and either Toronto or Boston or Tampa Bay would also win 90 something, and maybe that plays out this way. But it seems more to me that this division has good teams across the board, as opposed to 1 or 2 dominant teams, which is usually what people think of when they think of the AL East. And so that does change the kind of trickle down in that, there will be a last place team here, but maybe that last place team is still 500 because they're not giving as many wins away to a dominant 1-2.
Yeah.
But when I looked at all 15 teams and saw the over-unders, the very first thing that came to my head is Toronto over, easy. Like 78.5. They don't even have to be good.
So this is going to be one you're probably going to bet on then, too?
Yes, I will bet on that for sure.
I am not betting on it yet.
Okay.
Back to that. I thought second lowest number would probably be the Rays.
Yeah, correct.
Let's see. They had 80 wins last year, but their Pythag was only 73.
Yeah.
But it's a big difference, and it depends which way you think you're going to go with them, right? That both of those numbers underperformed Vegas's number last year, which was 85.5. Let's see. They added. They traded away everybody at the trade deadline.
They didn't. This is going to take forever, but they didn't really do anything, even by their standards. It was a very uneventful offseason. They made a few moves, but it was also, by the way, their first losing season since 2017. I generally take the over on the Rays, just almost sight unseen, because they always beat expectations, because no one ever has any expectations, because no one ever knows who their players are. Right. They lose star players every offseason, and actually they haven't this time. And people look at their roster, and it's just a collection of 23-year-old guys who were at Double-A a year earlier, and everyone goes, "Oh, they don't have anybody." Well, they always have guys. Right. They just have young, unproven guys. They have a guy, Junior Caminero, who's really good young bat. They're getting McClanahan and Drew Rasmussen back in the rotation after injuries. Their bullpen's always going to be good because they just collect these sort of misfit toys and turn them into relievers over and over and over again. That's what makes them difficult to project. Yeah, they're the lowest payroll,
and even
highest
the fact
winning.
Even the fact that they outscored their Pythag, well, yeah, they usually have a pretty good bullpen.
Right.
Teams
with a good bullpen are going to...
They feel like they do that pretty regularly.
So what is your guess for their over-under?
I guessed they were slightly higher than Toronto. I had them actually I had 2 higher than Toronto. So I had them at Tampa Bay at 82.5.
81.5 is the actual number.
All right.
Fangraphs projects them to win 82, and Baseball Prospectus also projects them to win 82, which is of no help whatsoever.
I put them in the middle tier, which was first pass was middle tier, which is 81, and my revision to it was, I still don't have any idea whether they're going to be better or worse than that. I'm going to keep them at 81. So I've got an 81 on an 81 and a half.
Well, you can take over.
Taking the under.
Okay, I'll take the over just to be different.
All right.
I mean, I honestly think they're a 500 team which is what you're saying also. But this
Right.
forces us to take it. So I have over written down here. They could certainly be the worst team in the division, but just in general, I give them the benefit of the doubt more than probably any other American League team just on a year-to-year basis of like they're always going to be slightly better than they appear because their talent is not known yet a lot of the time. And they, by the way, they do an exceptional job of coming up with pitching from the scrap heap. They do an exceptional job of just always having AAA guys who can step in and do some things. But
when they're trading away guys, it's usually because they have guys behind them that we don't really know about yet that are pretty good, which I think they've got a couple of rookies.
They really do lack
there.
star power right now, even by their standards. So I'm a little bit more skeptical than usual. So I will take the over 81.5. You are taking the under 81. I
doubt either one of us are going to bet on that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Third, I have the Boston Red Sox.
Yes, correct.
Red Sox finished 81-81 last year, which was a little bit better than Vegas expected. Vegas had a 77.5 number, and their Pythag was also 81.
Yes, they were just 500.
They were a 500
in every
team.
possible way last year.
But they had a very good offseason.
They traded for Garrett Crochet from the White Sox, who's probably one of the top 5 pitchers in baseball. They signed Alex Bregman to actually not that huge of a deal. I'm kind of skeptical on Bregman. I would not have signed him if I were a team like them. I mean, they got him at a price that it's fine. It's a shorter term deal with some opt-outs, but he would not have been a priority for me. I think he is at real risk of decline and has already kind of started his decline. But I could be wrong about that. Walker Buehler they signed. Aroldis Chapman, who we saw pitch against the Twins yesterday. And also they have 3 of the top 15 prospects in baseball, including 2 of the top 5, and 2 or maybe all 3 could be in their lineup, if not opening day, May, June, certainly first half. So it depends on how much you want to assume that these top, Walker Jenkins level prospects who have succeeded in the high minors, unlike Walker Jenkins yet, are going to jump into that lineup and be, pluses contributors. If you think that, well, they might get just a huge jolt, short-term and obviously long-term, with a couple of 22, 23-year-olds who have huge upside. But we know rookies sometimes, no matter how good of a prospect they are, they jump into the lineup and sometimes struggle. So I'm curious about that. The core of their lineup is Devers, Duran, Bregman, Cassis.
Yeah.
That's a strong the secondary pieces are maybe a little bit iffy. And then also Liam Hendricks, who's another old friend who's had a bunch of injuries and came back from cancer, is going to play a prominent role in their bullpen too. So it's an intriguing roster. It definitely has upside. But it's been a few years since the Red Sox have been good. What was your guess? And then I'll tell you what the projected
my guess is they were an 81-win team, and they got a little bit better, and Vegas kind of likes them, so they went 85.5.
86.5 is the number. Baseball Prospectus has them at 80 wins, which is last in the division for Pacoda, and Fangraphs has them at 85, which is roughly what they're being the over-under is. What is your?
My guess on them was they were a 85-86 win team. That's the first pass. Yeah. I left it right at that. I left it right at 86. If the number's 86.5, I'm going to go under.
Okay. I also am going under. You see now how this is getting difficult because John is sight unseen, and longtime listeners know John is not faking the sight unseen. You know what I mean?
When I'm determined to unsee something, I can unsee it.
Even when he's determined to see something, he'll unsee it. And so
I have lots of other things I can look at.
You see now that John is basically pulling numbers out of his butt, and he's within 1 win every time. And so you see that there's not that much, layups to be had here.
That's right.
For picking, because you're picking over under by a half or whatever. And if people are wondering why are all these numbers and a half, 85.5, 80.5, to avoid ties. Nobody wants to kiss their sister.
You don't want to get to the end of the season and have it be a tie, and you let them hold your money for 6 months only to get it back.
Yes,
you want to actually have a win or a loss. So they put it at a half number.
Neither of us have a sister, thankfully.
Yes,
I can't imagine what my sister would look like. That's a hairy woman. Have you ever kissed sisters? Oh, you had to think about it. This is
No, I mean, no, I was trying to see
romantically. I'm not saying like.
Oh yeah, no, we're not romantically. No.
Okay, there's still time.
I'm trying to think of how many ex people I have kissed. I knew their sister.
Mm-hmm. Right. So. But at all these swingers clubs that you go to, it's possible you kissed someone not knowing they were.
Yeah, that's right. Potentially,
right?
Yeah, all of those. Right.
John lives an interesting life, everyone. They don't know this. Okay, so we both took under on that. Okay, who do you think is in second place?
I'm guessing it's Baltimore.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
That is correct. Okay. Last year, Baltimore won 91 games.
Their Pythag was 90.
Yeah.
And that almost matched exactly Vegas's estimate, which was 90.5.
Right. This time last year.
It split the difference, basically.
Now, they lost Corbin Burns,
right,
which is huge.
Right.
And didn't really replace him with a high-end starting pitcher. I saw yesterday they signed Kyle Gibson, which, sorry to Kyle Gibson.
They have replaced him with a couple of like Charlie Mort, like a mid starting pitchers. Right.
Yes. And they also lost Santander, who was a 40 homer guy for them, to the Blue Jays within the division. If you like the the Orioles, you like them because they have a million young hitters.
Right, that's right.
They
are banking on them to continue to launch them higher.
And several of them were very good. And in fact, Matt Borgschulte got hired back to the Twins after working with all those young hitters in Baltimore the last couple of years. So, they have Adley Rutschman, they have Gunnar Henderson, Westberg, Causer, Mountcastle, and then also Jackson Holliday, who this time last year was the number one prospect in baseball and then struggled as a rookie. That's what I'm talking about with the Red Sox a minute ago. But still projects as a very, very good young hitter. To me, the biggest question with them is, especially having lost Burns, their starting pitching just isn't good on paper. They have some third and fourth starters kind of collected, but an elite level team.
They're hoping that their pitching can just kind of get them 5-6 innings, keep them in the game, and their offensive
and they have a good bullpen.
Beat the snot out of the other team.
Yes, and I would guess that they're kind of planning on adding a pitcher at the deadline, as opposed to signing a free agent. Sure. Let's get there. And what is your guess on the over/under for the Baltimore?
I basically said Vegas kept it the same as last year, 90.5.
86.5.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, this is
I'm
an
taking
example
the over on that.
No, I will also take the over on that. But they're a good example of what I was talking about NL versus AL earlier at the beginning of this.
That surprises me.
That is a very low total for the number 2 team in the American League East. I would bet there's been very few years out of the last 20 years where the number 2 projected team in the AL East had an 86.5 win total. Which I think tells you that they don't think the AL East is that fearsome anymore.
I guess so.
Or that none.
Listen. I can be sympathetic to people who take a look at their offseason and say that was a disappointing offseason, right? In the same way that I can be sympathetic towards the people who saw that with the Mariners and see that with the Twins. All three are teams that are hoping that their youth ends up lifting them beyond what they could have done in the offseason and they're obviously watching their pocketbooks, right? But I think there's real reason to believe Baltimore's youth can, in fact, lift them up.
But that can be true, and also why not add a good starting pitcher?
I'm not. Listen, that's what I'm saying is that I don't think that this team is going to be worse than it was last year. I mean,
because their payroll is not high at all.
No, and that's. I think you can make an argument that they, are going to be a little bit worse or the same without Burns. Like that absolutely hurts. But I just feel like enough growth from enough of the young players is such that.
But do the math this way. I don't disagree, but you look at this team, and if you thought it was a 90-win team, and they're saying 86.5, that's one good starting pitcher that they didn't spend money on.
Yep, you can. Yep.
So I will also take the over.
I'm taking the over, and I'm betting on that one.
Okay. On the Baltimore Orioles, 86.5 over, and I think they're the best team in that division.
Well, then you're definitely betting on them.
Well, I'll decide that in a second.
Okay.
The number 1 team in the division in terms of over/under total.
Yeah,
you should get this, John. There you go.
They had 94 wins last year, but their Pythag was 97, even a little bit better than that, and that exceeded Vegas's expectations, which were 92.5.
Now they've had a lot of comings and goings.
they've had an offseason, boy.
They lost Juan Soto, who's one of the best 5 hitters on the planet. They lost Clay Holmes, who's been a very good reliever for them. They lost Gleyber Torres, who's been their second baseman for the last 5 years or whatever. They lost Nestor Cortez. And then during spring training, they lost Garrett Cole to Tommy John surgery, who's their best starting pitcher. And now Giancarlo Stanton is out indefinitely with elbow problems. Both elbows are screwed up.
All right.
Luis Gil, who won Rookie of the Year, former Twins prospect, is out for the first month or whatever with arm problems. And then Clark Schmidt, who's another pitcher, just went down with an arm injury. So they also, though, added some guys. They added Max Fried, who's a very good lefty, got like $200 million from them. They traded for Brewers closer Devin Williams, who's probably been the best reliever in the National League for the last 3 or 4 years.
That's about right.
They signed Cody Bellinger, who is probably a bigger name than he is production right now, but still a very good player. They signed Paul Goldschmidt, who's a former MVP, but
also a big name.
Yes, he's like 40 now. You look at, especially post Garrett Cole injury, their starting pitching looks a little underwhelming, although they would certainly have better starting pitching than Baltimore. But, they have Fried and they have Rodon, and then after that, it's like, it's a little iffy. But the reality with the Yankees is Aaron Judge covers for a lot. Aaron Judge is the best hitter in the world, probably. And in terms of like projections, he projects for 8 wins above replacement. Right. Think of it this way. Carlos Correa, who's the Twins' best projected player generally, projects for like 4 wins above replacement. Aaron Judge is 2 Carlos Correas of value, basically. So when that's your number one guy on the roster, you're starting from a place of, advantage over the rest of the team when you have the literal best player in the league at that point. But yeah, the rest of the lineup around Judge is not spectacular, minus Soto, obviously. Right. They have some injury issues. They got some old guys that could be on their last legs.
It was just 2 years ago that they didn't even finish 500. And that was because, in part, they had Judge, but they didn't have a lot around him in the lineup, and they had a beat-up pitching staff.
What is your guess for the Yankees?
I thought Vegas would still like them a fair amount, 91.5.
88.5.
Wow.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about. They don't think anybody's good in the American League. And keep in mind, Yankees, much like Cowboys or Lakers, there's a Vegas inflation there because there's a lot of Yankees fans.
That's why I actually put them above Baltimore.
Who want to bet on their team to do well.
Right. That's right.
So you probably add 1 or 2 to their total. So 88.5. So you're taking the over.
I'm taking the over.
Which, look, over the last 50 years, you're not going to lose a whole lot of money taking the over on the New York Yankees.
Yep.
I will take the under on the New York Yankees. Right. I don't think they're going to have enough pitching. And I think aside from Judge, their lineup is not great. I do like their bullpen a lot. But I think they'll be good, but I do not think they will be great. So I'll take the under 88.5. So yeah, I'm going to bet on, within that division, I'm going to bet on Toronto, who I feel very strongly about. I'm sorry, Blue Jays fans listening to this, that I feel very strongly that they'll have a good season, which almost dooms them to have a bad season.
Right.
And the other one I will take over on Baltimore as my other one to bet on.
I'm going to take the over on Baltimore to bet on. What do I talk myself into on the other one?
Probably Yankees. Was your furthest off?
Yeah, I just hate betting on the Yankees.
Well, there's part of me that just wants to root against them.
Right.
So I'll go ahead and take the under.
Right. And I mean, you can make I just laid out the argument for why they won't be good this year. Like they're the same team as basically 2023 again, and they weren't good in 2023.
Yeah.
What in Boston? I took the under. And I really like Boston, but that's a bigger number. I think the biggest change that has happened over the last 5-6 years, why we have gotten worse, is these numbers end up being just much closer to what we thought they were going to be.
That's what I'm saying. There's
no. Yeah, that's right.
You've been fined for dead air now.
Yeah, I'm going to be. I guess I take Toronto, the over. 78.5.
That's not that fun, John. Now you're just aping my style.
I'm just. Oh no, yeah, okay. I won't do that one then. I'll do the under on Tampa.
Okay. Let's move on. But first, Let's talk about our next couple of sponsors. RotoWire. You are no doubt doing fantasy drafts. Many of the people listening to this.
That's right.
Here's what RotoWire can offer you. A free 2-day test run on their entire site, which you, by the way, can schedule and use for all of your fantasy drafts. You can get cheat sheets on there. You can do projections, player news, everything.
You can even sync your league, and they've got a draft assistant that will give you real-time advice you need to build a championship team based on your league's unique settings and RotoWire's expert
Yes,
practice.
and it is truly a free 2-day trial. They don't even ask for your credit card.
We have both been customers of theirs for 20 years?
Long before they were sponsoring the show.
Me is 20 plus years, right?
They are so confident that if you try the product, you will want to keep using the product. So all you have to do to get your free 2-day trial, and you can use it for all your drafts, like I said, go to rotowire.com/Gleeman. No reason not to try it out. No credit card required for the trial. Get all the player news, customized cheat sheets, rankings, analysis, sync up your drafts, and use it during the draft to actually help you. All that stuff. rotowire.com/Gleeman. Free 2-day trial.
You know what else they have? They have a DFS lineup optimizers, and that comes in handy when you're doing fantasy baseball outside of like your league, like you can do with Prize Picks. That's one of the exciting. We've talked about Prize Picks during the basketball season. We've talked about Prize Picks during the football season. But if you want to do fantasy player projection games like that online by yourself, you don't have to find a league or anything like that. You just download the Prize Picks apps, and pretty soon, and in fact, it's already started, you can start doing Major League Baseball Prize Picks, where you're taking a look at a player, and they might say,
you pick more or less.
Yeah, you pick
which
more.
Which might seem familiar here. And you can do it. I know I've seen it for NBA. We've tried it out. And you can do it for MLB.
And for the NCAA draft, or the NCAA tournament, which we did all day yesterday. We were comparing, like, who's this player? Let's see what their Prize Picks numbers are and see what we think they're going to be doing or not doing.
You can sign up today and get $50 instantly if you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks, where they discount player projections up to 25% to kind of give you layups, basically, to provide even more value for your lineup. So, Prize Picks, let's see, what's the Prize Pick?
Prize Picks, run your game. That's their tagline. Prize Picks, run your game. Fantastic. Easy way to play fantasy in all your sports.
Download the app. Use the code Gleeman to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Gleeman after you download the Prize Picks app and play your first $5. All right. AL West. Start from the bottom.
Start from the bottom.
Who do you think is the lowest projected? We can go through these probably.
I am going with. I had the Angels as my lowest projection.
Okay. They won 63 last year. Pythag for them was 64 last year.
That underperformed Vegas, which was 71.5 for them last year.
Yeah. They actually added some decent veterans.
They had a decent offseason.
Kikuchi, I like that signing a lot. Kenley Jansen's their new closer. Jorge Soler, power hitter for the middle of the lineup. They still have Mike Trout, but he's become sadly kind of an afterthought because of all the injuries over the last 4 or 5 years with him. Still theoretically a great player, just has not played. Basically missed 5 out of 6 months last year. Also, they've done an interesting thing with their prospects, especially like their first round picks in the past 3 or 4 years, which is they get them to the majors like the same year. Half their lineup by the end of the season, I think, will be first or second round picks who have gotten to the majors within 12 months, certainly, and often within 3 or 4 months of being drafted, which is something that other teams just don't do. Yeah. They've gotten some okay results from those guys early on, but I am curious how it will kind of impact them long term, because if a lot of these guys that have been clearly rushed to the major, and these guys are often the first player from their class to reach the majors. Like, they've got a handful of guys like that. If these guys go on to become star players, this might be a copycat type of thing where teams go, maybe we've reached the point now from a developmental standpoint, things have changed enough with technology and data and how we coach guys and all that maybe we don't have to, especially college players that we draft.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have to have them spend 3 years in the minor leagues. But if these guys don't reach their potential, then you go, well, they rushed them. So it's an interesting thing. I tend to assume that the Angels are not the ones who are going to be right about things when they're zigging and the rest of the league is zagging, let's say. But it's not impossible, I guess. They've been bad now for a very long time, despite.
Well, they've been underperformers, I guess, is a better way of saying it.
I mean, they've had a losing record they haven't made the playoffs in 10 years.
No, okay. All right.
Despite having either the best or the two best players in the league for most of that time in Ohtani and Trout. What was your
I basically said, well, they were a 63-win team last year. They got a little bit better in the offseason. And that was Vegas isn't going to go down that low anyway, so I put it at 67.5.
72.5.
Yeah, I'm not
for
taking the under
for the Angels, which strikes me as higher than I expected.
It's not that much. I mean, I probably didn't adjust for the Vegas's big enough correction. Like Vegas just doesn't love a 67.5.
Right, there's a lot of regression, but I will take the over on that. I might be the only person in America who is somewhat optimistic about the Los Angeles Angels.
I feel like I am optimistic about them. I'm still taking the under at 72.5.
Well, I'm going to tell you that you're not that optimistic about them, John. You're projecting them to lose 90 games.
This is the Detroit argument we had 10, 15 years ago.
Well, no, you cannot say you're optimistic about a team and you think they're going to lose more than 90 games.
You're saying optimistic, and I think people were down on them to the point where they expected low 60s. That was sort of my
they've been horse shit for 10 years. That's why, John.
So what number do you think they'll get to? It's 72.5.
75 or something.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't take a lot to be not terrible. And if my theory about the American League as a whole proves correct, which is that it's all kind of clustered towards 500 as opposed to 3 or 4 standout teams, there's going to be some extra wins to be had for mediocre teams.
And I'll say that may be especially true in the AL West, which last year kind of suggested that whole division was struggling, and I didn't see a lot of reason to change that this year. So
okay, who are you saying is the fourth?
Oakland.
Yeah,
actually, 69 wins, 67 Pythagorean, and 50 that greatly exceeded Vegas's expectations, which were 57.5.
Extremely bad in 2023. Right. Like they lost, I forget, 20 of their first 3 or something like that. Right. They were forced to. Well, first of all, they're moving to Sacramento,
right,
where they're going to be playing in a AAA ballpark in front of fans who I guess will embrace them, but I mean, first of all, it's not like their owners have done.
Just we're clear, it's not that they're moving there forever. Like that's our new forever home.
Might be.
I mean, it might be.
There's a lot of doubt that Vegas is ever going to happen.
Yeah, but there's no way they're going to just stay in Sacramento for the rest of their existence. Well, my point is that fans are not going to be anxious to adopt this as, hey, we've got a new baseball team here for the rest of our lives.
The owner of the Sacramento Kings greatly disagrees with you.
Huh, all right.
He thinks they're going to be there, but we'll see. Either way, it's a minor league ballpark in front of. It's not like Oakland fans are going to go there. Oakland fans wants them to die,
right? Yeah,
and rightfully so. What their ownership group, John Fisher, has done to that community is disgraceful, in my opinion. Basically, invest nothing in the team or the ballpark for long enough that people stop caring, and then use that as an excuse to move the team. I mean, we've seen that versions of that. But their payroll has been so low, and their team has been so terrible that. And I mean, like Billy Beane isn't even barely involved anymore. Like he's running soccer teams and stuff. Like this isn't the Moneyball anything.
Right.
That MLB and the Players Association basically forced them to spend money. They said you can't continue, and the Marlins are in the same boat. There's a couple teams in the same boat where you can't continue to get revenue sharing totaling 50, 80, 100 million and have a payroll that's 50 million.
They're trying to enforce their own version of a salary floor without there actually being a salary floor.
Yeah.
So Luis Severino, come on down, collect your check.
They gave Severino kind of a weird contract, but it's fine because he's a good player. Who cares if they overpaid him or whatever? But he benefited from that. And they also gave extensions to old friend Brent Rooker, who I'm very happy about.
Yep.
He got $50 million or something like that as a late blooming, now one of the better power hitters in baseball. I think Sacramento is like his fourth team since the Twins, and he has really found a home there. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy and a more deserving guy, so I'm happy about that. And then they also more recently extended a good rookie from last year, Lawrence Butler, and gave him, bet on his future. That's fine. I'm glad. I mean, I'd rather these teams spend money, even if they're not spending it quote unquote wisely or whatever. It beats not spending money. But they did it in a very strange way where they basically gave like one or two players a longer and bigger contract than anybody ever projected, and then just left the rest of the roster.
Yeah,
like
right.
Gio Urshela is their starting third baseman, and
Right,
the bullpen's not. The back of the rotation's bad. Like it's very strange. It to me, it really reeks of. All right, you told us we had to spend money. We gave Severino $50 million.
That's it. Yeah.
As opposed
Right,
to we signed 6 guys for $8 million each, or something,
Right.
something like that, which would have made more sense. What is your?
I guessed 69.5, but I know that's wrong because 72.5 is the lowest.
71.5 is the actual
so
over-under.
71 is the
So they basically view the Angels and the Athletics as similar. Angels 72.5, A's 71.5. Fangraphs has them at 76. Baseball Prospectus has them at 72, which is basically exactly the over-under.
Yeah.
What are you?
Those are higher numbers than I have. I had my guess was that they were going to be at 67 wins, so I'll take the under.
I will also take the under. I think that they're not very deep, and I think the combination of playing all your games basically at a temporary home that is a minor league ballpark in front of fans that are sort of there is going to wear on them.
Yep.
And I think that's probably going to cost them a little by the end of the season. I think from a health standpoint, the facilities are not going to be as good, et cetera, et cetera. I know they've boosted them a little bit, but I will also take the under on them.
Yeah.
Okay. Third,
I'm
right in the middle of the
Texas
AL West.
Rangers.
You are, well,
Incorrect?
sort of correct. It's a tie.
It's a tie.
But
Okay,
I'll give you credit for
okay,
that.
good.
They're
All right.
third on my list here.
All right.
Texas 2 years ago won the World Series.
Right.
And then last year slipped to 78 wins, 75 wins as the Pythagorean.
Which greatly disappointed Vegas, which had them at 88.5 to begin the season.
Yes.
Because they'd won like 90 plus the year before.
I don't even think. I think they won 89 games.
Well,
the year
they
before.
might have won 89.
They tied
Yeah,
for the division
right.
with Houston, I
That's
remember.
right, yeah.
They just went on a run in the they're by the way, and Arizona, who they beat in the World Series, both great examples of the theory. Just get into the playoffs and get
See
hot.
what happens, right.
Last year they bet a lot on injured starting pitchers, formerly great but injured starting pitchers. DeGrom, Scherzer, old friend Tyler Mahle, I'm forgetting one too, and they were basically all not helpful.
Yeah.
They were all injured because injured starting pitchers tend to be injured. Now DeGrom is back, but he's like the Byron Buxton of pitchers. It's like he's never not been great when he's healthy, but he's also never been healthy. Lineup wise, they're very interesting. I mean, we saw the lineup get hot in the playoffs 2 years ago. They have Seager and Simeon up the middle, which is a great combo, double play combo at short and second. Right. Wyatt Langford, who was picked 2 spots ahead of Walker Jenkins in the draft 2 years ago, reached the majors very quickly and had a very strong stretch run. I think he's going to be one of the better right-handed hitters in baseball in the middle of that lineup. The Twins would have loved if he were there, similar to Walker Jenkins at 5. They loved him. But to me, starting pitching is a real question. You have DeGrom, who has the potential to be great.
Right.
But Eovaldi, who they re-signed, has been very good, but he's getting way up there in age. Tyler Mahle, I wouldn't count on being healthy for 3 innings ever at this point. But he's signed. Yeah. And then they have Jonathan Gray, who's been one of their best starters. He broke his wrist in spring training, and he's going to be out for like a month or 2. So I got real questions with their rotation. I have some questions with their bullpen. I think their lineup has a chance to be very good. It's very deep. They signed Jock Peterson to be a middle-of-the-order guy. So it's an interesting team. I do think there's upside if like DeGrom and Mahle and some of those guys stay healthy. I just have no willingness to bet on them staying healthy. So what is your guess at their over?
My guess is that Vegas was going down from the 88.5 they had last year, but figured last year was just kind of a down year, and they ended up at 81.5.
85.5.
Wow.
Is the over-under. Yeah.
So this whole division is going up much, and I think part of it is because I think maybe my numbers on the high end are too high.
Right.
And basically just because the whole Vegas is looking at this whole division going, somebody's got to win this division.
Yeah. Well, so Fangraphs has them at 84. Baseball Prospectus has them at 90. I didn't get a chance to look why that is, but it's interesting. 85.5. To me, easy under on 85.
Yeah, I'm taking under too.
I think they absolutely have a chance to be a 90-win team, but I'm unwilling to assume injured pitchers are going to be not injured, basically.
Yeah, I picked my guess on I put them first. My first tier was like they're an 81-win team, and then I said they're probably a little better than that, 83. And I didn't know which way I was want to go on an 83.5 or something like that, but 85.5, I got to take the under on that.
Tied with them.
Wow.
In second, or tied for second, I guess.
Seattle.
Yeah, you're right. 85 wins last year.
Yeah.
89 Pythag. Same story.
80, which splits the Vegas expectation, by the way. 87.5 was the Vegas expectation. So if they would have done
last year,
if they would have done their Pythag, they would have been the over. Instead, they were the under.
Similar story for them the past couple of years, which was excellent starting pitching.
Yep.
Pretty good bullpen, including Andres Munoz, who's fantastic as a reliever, and a lineup that has like 2 or 3 guys who can hit, basically. And they tried to get Jorge Polanco last year, and he didn't work out, and they actually re-signed him. And not only did they re-sign him, he's going to play third base.
Oh, wow.
Now, we saw that briefly in his last year with the Twins.
He didn't
go well.
Yeah.
Didn't go well. I give him credit for trying it with the Twins because it was to make room for Eddie Julian.
He'll try anything. He's great.
Yes. They still have very good starting pitching, although George Kirby, who's one of their better starters, is out for the beginning of the season with some shoulder problems, I want to say. They still have a very good bullpen. Julio Rodriguez is awesome. He's probably one of the 10 best all-around players in the league. Cal Raleigh is a very underrated power-hitting catcher who's also excellent defensively. I would say he's kind of like a rich man's Ryan Jeffers in a lot of ways. Those two are great. Those two are MVP caliber players, basically. And then the rest of their lineup is a lot of question marks. And they did nothing this offseason.
Yeah.
And when I say nothing, they re-signed Jorge Polanco coming off a terrible year. And their biggest addition, not re-signing, was another old friend, Donovan Solano. And I'm not trying to speak. Donovan Solano can roll out of bed when he's 50 and hit a single somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
But as a DH first baseman, as your big addition,
right.
I mean, we saw when the Twins signed him, and he worked out great for the Twins. He had a productive year as like a 2/3 of the time role player.
He's Mickey Gasper. What Mickey Gasper aspires to.
Just think when the Twins signed him, it was in the middle of spring training.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
He's Seattle's big addition for a team that had horrible offensive numbers. Now, I will note that whatever their ballpark is called now, it's not Safeco anymore, but Seattle's ballpark is the worst ballpark in the world for hitters. And so their raw offensive numbers are always even worse than look worse than they actually are, but they just don't score runs. And so, their hitters like Raleigh are a lot better than you probably perceive because he still hits 25, 30 homers in a ballpark that's impossible to hit in.
Maybe their pitchers are a little bit worse.
That's it. So you think, they have a great rotation. I'm not saying they don't have a really good rotation, but it's a very easy place to pitch because fly balls die on the warning track. There's some foul territory. It's just year after year, and especially the last 3 years or so. It's it's like Coors Field reversed. Yeah. It's an extremely good place to pitch.
My Vegas guess on their number was 86.5. It's 85.5.
85.5.
Said.
Yeah. Fangraphs has them at 84. Baseball Prospectus has them at 87. So right around.
All right. I put them at my first pass was they're one of the teams that's 5 games above 500, but not 10 games above 500. But I think they're even a little bit better than that. So I put my number at 87, which is 1.5 over the number that they've got. So I will take the over on it.
Okay. I'm also taking the over on the Seattle Mariners. We have not, as you guys can probably tell, conferred on any of these. So,
no, we don't. We varied on the Angels.
Yeah. We got some variance. We didn't have much variance last year, and we both sucked. So, okay, first in the division, you can get
Houston Astros.
You got
who won 88 games, had a Pythag of 91. That both disappointed Vegas, which had their number at 92.5.
Yeah, I mean, they've been the kings of this division for a decade.
And then they got the snot kicked out of them in the offseason.
Yeah, they traded Kyle Tucker, who's an MVP caliber player. They lost Alex Bregman to free agency, like we talked about earlier. Justin Verlander departed.
Yep.
Ryan Presley was traded to the Cubs. There's
Yep.
an old friend who had been their closer for so long.
Kikuchi, the
who was a
trade
deadline pickup,
yeah.
who was brilliant for them down the stretch, signed with the Angels, as we mentioned a minute ago. Now, they did add Christian Walker
Yep.
at first base, who's probably one of the more underrated players overall. Paredes, they traded for to play third base. They're moving now Altuve to left field at age 35, which is very interesting, so that they can play Dubon at second base. I don't know why you wouldn't just leave Altuve at second base for the rest of his career or something. It's not looked good for him in left field. A 5'2", 35-year-old
like
left fielder, whatever he is. All that's true, like you said. This strikes me as a team that is on the fumes of the dynasty. You still have Altuve.
Yeah.
You still have Yordan Alvarez, who, as Twins fans know, is an absolute monster. But the management, coaching, front office is not around from the dynasty.
Yeah.
The Twins have more guys from that group, in Kevin Goldstein and a couple others, than they do. This is a team that is now being run by Jeff Bagwell, Reggie Jackson, yes, that Reggie Jackson, and Jim Crane, who is the billionaire who owns them, is essentially like a Jerry Jones type who is like making the decisions now. And I think you can see that in the quality of the process involved in some of these decisions. And I suspect you're going to see it in the lack of kind of talent coming through the pipeline, because that was the thing. They every year had one or two more standout pitchers. They had one or two. Well, the guys who did that are no longer there. And so I do think this is the end of the road for that group, and just assuming they're going to be dominant. But they still have Yordan Alvarez. They still have Framber Valdez, who the Twins saw in the playoffs.
And look at the rest of the division.
And they still have Josh Hader at closer. Altuve can still hit, even if he's mismatched in left field. And this division is not that good of a division. And so this is an example of where the over-under, I think, can be useful, because in my head it's like, oh, they're limping it along here.
Yeah, right.
They're shedding talent.
It's a good comparison to the Tigers of 1980.
And then you go
2012 through 2013.
Well, you think they're going to finish in third? Well, no, actually, I think they're going to win the division, but only barely.
Right.
So what is your guess for the over-under on the Houston?
89.5.
86.5.
Wow.
For the Houston Astros.
Well, that works out well.
Yeah,
because I also put them at sort of like first pass. I put them at still 10 games above 500 team. But I said, but they're not quite as good as that anymore. So my final number on them was 88, but that still puts me in the over, and I love the over at 86.5 there.
Yeah,
I like it so much I'm probably betting on it.
Before I looked up the over/under totals, in my head I was going to bet Houston under.
Right.
I figured it'd be 91, maybe something like that.
Right.
90. But at 86.5, they can go 87 and 75, which is not even good.
Right.
And you can still win that bet. So I feel like I'm compelled to take the over, even though I do believe that they are kind of leaking oil as a franchise, not just from the roster standpoint, from a decision-making and management standpoint. Okay, so I'll take the over. In terms of betting, the two that I want to bet on here are Houston over.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm going to bet Angels over.
Okay.
Just because if I'm the only idiot to do that, I might as well really be stupid.
You go for it.
If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. If you're going to be something, be a moron. There.
I'm going to take the Sacramento under as my second. I'm going to take the Houston over, and I'm going to take Sacramento under.
Before we get to the AL Central and the Minnesota Twins, let's talk about our last couple sponsors. One is BetterHelp. We've talked about them before. The idea behind BetterHelp is that if you wake up one day and you decide, you know what? I'm ready to get some assistance on something that I feel like I need help with. Mentally, physically, whatever it is. Something that's been gnawing at you. The last thing you need is any barrier for entry, any roadblocks to make you go, I'll do it tomorrow. Because then tomorrow happens and you're not ready to do it. You're not in the same mindset. And so the beauty of BetterHelp is if you wake up one day and you say, I want to talk to someone about this, I want to get some help with this, you go to BetterHelp, they can set you up with real licensed therapists who specialize in all sorts of different things, and they can set it up with whatever you're comfortable with. So if you want to do a video chat, perfect. If you don't want to be on camera, phone call. If you're like me and you hate phone calls, you do a live chat, you type back and forth.
It's also just more affordable, like because you're not worried about the rental fees and rent fees that the therapist that you're going to go visit, all that other stuff.
And they can set it up within a few days typically.
And they've got 30,000 therapists. So if you don't find one that you click with right away, it's easy enough to go and change and find one that meets your needs better.
Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/Gleeman to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com/Gleeman. And our last sponsor today,
Factor.
is Factor Meals. John came back.
If you open up that refrigerator door, you'll see 6 Factor meals stacked up there just in time, because not only did I just get back from a month in Florida and have nothing in the fridge to eat. No, let me see. Not that I didn't have anything in the fridge. There was all kinds of stuff that had gone bad in the fridge, but nothing in the fridge to eat. I had Factor delivered in there. And now on top of that, Chrissy just left me for 5 days to go to Philadelphia. And I don't want to have to go shopping and figure all that stuff out. Instead, I've just
Factor meals delivered right to you. Healthy, tastes good. You can also choose kind of your menu with each delivery, where
I've got
if you want meat heavy, if you want keto, if you want vegetarian, if you want something kids like, they have all those available to you. It's super easy. You just heat them up and you eat it. We've both tried it. It's good.
And it's really tasty stuff. Their butter chicken was unbelievable.
Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and then use the code factorpodcast and you get 50% off your first box, and they'll give you free shipping. So that's using the code Factor, FACTOR, Factor Podcast.
All one word, Factor Podcast.
At factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
50%. What a
Okay.
deal.
Let's talk about the AL Central.
All right.
I'm going to give you this one, John.
Done.
The Chicago White Sox have the lowest over-under in the AL Central.
Why'd you ruin it?
I'm going to give you that as a gimme putt.
How low can it go?
Yeah. So last year they won 41 games, which is the worst record in modern baseball history.
And it wasn't a fluke, because Pythag was 45.
Yeah.
and that greatly disappointed Vegas, which had at 60 and a half. 60 and a half is about one of the lower numbers we've ever seen.
I mean, that's as low as you're going to get, basically.
And they still came nowhere near that. And then they
traded Garrett Crochet, like we talked about, to the Red Sox. They didn't trade Luis Robert,
right? But
I would expect that's coming. I think they want him to have like a good, healthy first half to recoup some value, and then they'll trade him. But
good luck with that.
They are the thing you have to kind of.
And they added Martin Perez.
Yeah, they didn't have anybody good that you care about. They really made no effort to do anything, and I get it. They're rebuilding.
They got a new coach,
manager.
Manager,
Will Venable. Yeah, I feel for him because, I mean, what's the best case? They stick with you for 3 bad years so you can maybe manage when it comes out the other side. But the thing you have to consider with a team this bad is kind of the dead cat bounce theory,
right?
Which is, well, not to be too gross, but like dead cat bounce is, I think it's like even an economic theory where like, you can picture in your head, if you toss a dead cat out the window, it is going to bounce up.
That's right.
At least initially.
Yeah.
No matter how bad something is, there's often like a slight recovery or a slight bounce back or a slight regression to the mean, basically. And so I don't think there's any argument that on paper, this is actually a worse roster than they began last season with, because they don't have Crochet. They have lost some other guys to free agency and injuries and trades and stuff like that. But they could very easily have a worse talent level on the roster and still win significantly more games just with a little better luck or a little better this or a little better that.
This is the over-under number I am most interested in, because I knew my guess was ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, the odds of being as bad as they were in any season are so, I mean, it's never happened before. And then the odds of doing it again, even if you have worse talent, you're going to not have everything go bad the same way, theoretically.
In 2023, the White Sox were the Oakland A's, right? Oakland A's were this team that was looking historically bad, to the point where we were talking, how bad can they be? And they were terrible. And then the over-under number for them last year was 57.5.
People thought they're still terrible.
And by the way, they exceeded that by 10.
Right.
They were just even much better than
They were
that,
still
right?
bad.
Yeah.
They just
Like that is the bounce back kind of thing that you can kind of see with something that is just absolutely fallen off in ledge.
Right.
Now, that said, 57.5 is the lowest over under number we had ever seen since we have done this.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, it's got to be lower than that. But I didn't know how much lower than that. My guess is I went too low, which is I went with 51.5.
54.5.
I was going to say, I bet you it's like 54.5. Right.
Think in your head what that means if you're listening to this. 54.5 means that they're over under the point where they're forcing you to pick better or worse is a 54 win, 108 loss team.
Right, that's right.
108 losses is like the baseline.
Yeah, you could have them lose 108 losses and still
win your bet as an over.
That's right.
So 54.5. I will note that Fangraphs has them at 63 and Baseball Prospectus has them at 62. Now you might be saying to yourself, wow, that's like 8 or 9 wins above the over under. Keep in mind how heavily regressed projection systems are.
Right.
They are not built to deal with a team that is this horse S because they assume push everything towards kind of the middle. And so they're getting kind of a built-in credit for being a Major League Baseball team, even though they really aren't a Major League Baseball team. So I would keep that in mind. 54.5 is the over-under, which think of it this way. If they just hit that over-under, that is a 14-win improvement from last year. 14-win improvement.
So you want to know what my number was?
Yeah.
55.
Well, you're taking the over, I guess.
Jesus.
You're taking the over. Do it. Number one White Sox fan, John Bonus.
God.
I've always suspected that.
That's me.
You can bond with all the other White Sox fans
hate it when
on
I
the
do
Twins
that.
beat. Dan and Betsy and Phil.
I'm taking the over.
Okay. I'm going to take the under
Good
on the
idea.
Chicago White Sox.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to set the record again this year, but I look at this team and I truly think, even more so than last year's team, this is the worst on paper opening day team that I've ever seen. Like in my 20 years of paying attention to this stuff. I really think they have like 3 major league caliber players. And the other thing is I would expect all those to be traded. Like Luis Robert is really good when he's healthy. There's no chance if he has a good season, he's still on this team after July. And so I think that's a factor too. I think their starting rotation is horrendous. Whereas they actually got one good spot from Crochet last year for the most part. They limited his usage, but I think their rotation is legitimately horrendous. I think their bullpen is pretty bad too. And I also think they've had some young arms go down with injuries in camp already to further, kind of decrease the depth and the upside. So I think this is maybe the worst team in terms of my expectations in 22 decades. With that said, they will win more than they won last year. But I don't think they're going to avoid losing 110 games, basically. So I'll take the under on 54.5. Here's where it gets tricky.
I have Kansas City as the next one.
In 4, second to last.
Second to last.
It's
Is that right?
It's a tie.
Okay, between are they
City
one of
is
the two?
one of them.
Okay,
So
well we'll just go with that one then.
Kansas City last year greatly exceeded. They won 30 more games than they did the year before. They were horrible the year before.
Yeah, they had 86 wins, but their Pythag was 92.
Yes.
And that greatly exceeded Vegas' expectations as well, which had them at 73.5.
Because they had gone
they crushed
56 and 106, I think, the year before.
That's
They were
right.
legitimately
They were
terrible.
bad, right.
They were White Sox-esque the year before. They made a few moves. They traded Brady Singer, who's a good starting pitcher, for Jonathan India, hoping to add a bat to the lineup that only went like 2 or 3 deep last year around Bobby Witt Jr. They signed Carlos Estevez to be their new closer. They also at the deadline traded for Lucas Erceg, who's a good setup man from Oakland. So the 1-2 in the bullpen's not bad. Similar to what I said about the Yankees, Bobby Witt is probably the second best player in the league.
Sure.
And so they're starting from a very good spot.
Right.
The number one spot on their roster is very much better than everyone else's except maybe the Yankees and the Orioles or something like that. But Bobby Witt Jr. is phenomenal, and he's 24, and the Twins have learned as much as everyone how just he can murder you offensively, defensively, as a base runner. Like he has a Hall of Fame trajectory at 23. Would have won MVP in a whole lot of seasons if not for Judge last year in the American League. Finished a very strong runner-up at age 23. And so when you think about whatever you think about the Royals, don't just think of Bobby Witt Jr. as a really good player. Think of him as the best player, basically, and factor that in. I think but their lineup is still, to me, very shallow. Salvador Perez is great, but he's also extremely old and worn out from catching, I think. But he's Vinny Pasquantino is a good first baseman. Jonathan India, who they traded for, is okay as a hitter, but not spectacular. He's like a rich man's Austin Martin, is how I would just. He's what the Twins would like Austin Martin to turn into as a hitter, as a player. The rest of their lineup, outfield, they just don't add guys. I don't know. It seems like
like a lot of teams in the American League. A lot of times we've talked about.
They didn't. They spent a lot last year on free agents, and it worked. And then they just did nothing this offseason, basically. But the other thing, not only is Bobby Witt Jr. spectacular, I think there's an argument to be made that the Royals have the best position player and the best pitcher in the American League Central, in Cole Reagans being the best pitcher. I think he was like 4th in the Cy Young last year, 200 and something strikeouts, lefty, dominated the Twins a couple starts. Yeah. And so they're starting on both sides of the ball from a very high point of Bobby Witt Jr. and Cole Reagans. And so maybe they need less quality depth because of that. They also have Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha as a 2-3 behind Reagans in the rotation, which is pretty good. I think Estevez and Urseg plus some other relievers make for a pretty decent bullpen, at least in terms of the high-end talent. But the lineup, to me, I don't get why they wouldn't have wanted to sign a Max Kepler type or two. Like a
Santander.
Well, yeah, that would have worked too. But I mean, that was a longer term. I'm saying even if they're being cheap.
Right. Yeah. Like a 1 year something. Yeah.
10, 15 million bucks for a couple of guys, DH outfield would have really helped them a lot. What is your predicted?
I came up with 83.5 for them.
82.5.
82.5?
Yeah.
I'll take the over on that because my prediction was 84.
Both Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus has them at 81 and 81, exactly 500.
Really?
Which is very similar to the 82.5 projection. Yeah. Do you want the over or the under on 82.5? I'm taking the over. Okay. My guess was 84. I will also take the over, and I will note that I was extremely skeptical of Kansas City last year because of their spending.
Yeah, I agree.
They were kind of
I thought we were way ahead on that.
In vogue. Kind of hipster breakout pick. Yeah. And guess what? Everyone was right. Yeah. And I was wrong. Yeah. I think that their starting pitching and the high-end talent on the team is excellent. And I guess putting some faith in kind of the role players, a couple people emerging to fill some blanks with them. I don't think they're a great team, but I think, they could go 85 and 77 pretty easily in my mind. And I don't think they'll be a losing team. So I'll take the over on that too. Tied with them. You want to guess who that is?
Well,
could be anybody in the division. It's a very
I know
closely grouped division.
I think if it was the Twins, you would not be telling me it. So I'm going to go with the Detroit Tigers.
Cleveland Guardians.
I was afraid about that one.
82.5. They won 92 in the division last year. Their Pythag last year was 90.
91. Yeah, right.
Their offseason was very strange, I thought. First of all, their payroll is under $100 million right now, which isn't uncommon for them. But they essentially dumped Andres Jimenez's contract on the Blue Jays. Yeah, they ended up with a good pitcher in that swap. But and then they dumped Josh Naylor on the Diamondbacks, who Josh Naylor has killed the Twins at times, slugging first baseman, and then
replaced him with
Carlos Santana for the exact same price. Right. Now, why they couldn't have had both and had a $105 million payroll instead of a $97 million payroll, I don't know. But that was their choice. And they re-signed Shane Bieber, who's been awesome for them over the years, but is coming back from Tommy John surgery and will not be available in the first half. Right. And so I look at this team and I think, well, they definitely didn't get better.
No, but they also didn't necessarily get worse.
They just sort of, I think, treaded water and got cheaper. Yeah, which is not uncommon in this division. The Twins have attempted to do that essentially this season and last season also. But we see from a Twins perspective how dangerous that can be. The kind of don't make an effort to get better, just make an effort not to get worse and to get cheap. Yeah. Well, you lose depth in that. Sure, you end up trading guys who you like and trying to replace them with slightly different, lesser versions of them. It can be tricky. Now, Jose Ramirez is still awesome.
Right, yep. Speaking of a high-end
To me,
player on your...
I don't even think he's underrated at this point. I used to say he was the most underrated player in baseball, but once you're that for 10 years, it's like, okay. Stephen Kwan is still excellent on both sides of the ball for them. Manzardo is a guy they got from Tampa Bay, a slugging first baseman who showed some signs of being a nailer type in the middle of the lineup for them. But then after that, the lineup is pretty iffy.
Yeah.
Naylor was like their cleanup guy for years and years, and I'm not saying he was an MVP candidate, but he drove in tons of runs and he was dangerous.
He hurt the Twins.
And Carlos Santana was awesome for the Twins last year.
Yeah.
But he's like 400 years old, and at some point, I don't know. He's certainly a hell of a lot better defensively than Josh Naylor, but I just look at their lineup beyond like Kwan, Ramirez, Manzardo, maybe one or two other guys, and I think, are they going to score runs? Because last year they scored more runs than people expected, but 2 years ago they didn't because they just didn't have that much power. Now they're built to not need to score runs. They're built on pitching, obviously. But you look at their rotation, if Bieber's
pitching hasn't really been a strength of theirs.
Right. It's one of those things where it lags behind the perception.
Right. Yeah.
And there's been some injuries involved in that. The bullpen has been awesome. It was fantastic last year until the playoffs. But the rotation wasn't particularly good last year. And I look and it's like, okay, Bieber's out probably for the first half. Tanner Bybee's really good. Tristan McKenzie is really good, but has been injured a lot. Gavin Williams is, I think, a potential breakout guy who throws upper 90s for them in the rotation. They got Luis Ortiz, who's another really hard thrower. They got that in the Jimenez two-trade setup. So maybe there's some upside in the rotation, but it's certainly not as proven, as scary as it has been in the past. They're relying an awful lot on this unbeatable bullpen. And you still have all the guys who were phenomenal last year. I mean, it was one of the better regular season bullpens ever. Right. Clase, Cade Smith, who I voted, I think, second for Rookie of the Year. Hunter Gaddis. These guys all had like 1-something ERAs or 0-something ERAs until the playoffs when Clase imploded. And maybe that was just a guy who was tired at the end of the season. Maybe there was some scouting and pitch tipping elements of that, although he basically just throws cutters. But I do wonder, like, does that linger? Because they are in a position where they need that bullpen to be unbeatable. And if that bullpen is not unbeatable, then they are very beatable.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think
they're still better than 82.5.
Yeah.
Well, I had that. Listen, they're a 91-win team that didn't necessarily. Now, you could say, listen, they rode a bullpen and they were lucky on that, and you can't count on that again. They were still a legitimate 91-win team.
Sure.
It's a right path. They didn't necessarily get any worse during the. They didn't necessarily get any better, but they didn't get any worse. And I had actually put their number at 86.5. Yeah. And my actual guess on their wins this year is 88. So they're an easy over for me, and I'm going to bet on that.
I think there's a little bit of a Tampa element with them in terms of, on the pitching side, you look at them.
Also, their new coach impressed me last year. I don't know. I mean, manager, last year. But
Stephen Vogt, won manager of the year. Yeah. But I think a lot of people look at their pitching and the names involved, especially from the bullpen. I mean, a year ago, Cade Smith was nobody.
Right.
And then he was the third best reliever in the world. Hunter Gaddis had not even good career numbers at like age 30 or whatever, and then he was amazing. And so there's a tendency, I think, to look at the roster, which I guess, just did with the rotation and go, is this even that good?
Yeah, right.
But it almost always is good. And I think it's similar to Tampa Bay overall, where you look at Tampa Bay and you go, is this even a good team? And then you look, and it is a good team. So I give them a little benefit of the doubt on the pitching side, certainly. But I have very big questions about the lineup. And yet, in my head, I was like, I guess I'm kind of low on Cleveland. But I ain't 82.5 low.
Right.
I mean, they go 83 and 79 and win. Like, that's not anything in this division. It's not going to be hard to. It shouldn't be hard to win 85 games in this division. Right, Now, unfortunately, none of the teams are trying, really.
Right, yes. Right.
A couple of them are actively not trying in terms of spending. And then the other three are just sort of, we didn't do much, including the Twins, obviously. But I will take the over on Cleveland. Right. I certainly would like the under to happen on Cleveland, much like with the Yankees. But, okay, second place in terms of over-unders with a division.
Well, I had a tie.
Okay. Well, you're right, I guess. Technically.
Right, yes. So I guess I'll put Detroit so we can save the Twins for the preview for the final thing, right?
This is how it is.
Yeah. Detroit had 86 wins. Pythagorean also of 86 wins, or expected wins of 86 wins, and that beat Vegas's expectations of 81.5 last year.
By the way, just to finish on Cleveland, I didn't mention this. Both projection systems hate Cleveland.
Oh, really?
78 wins for Fangraphs and 80 for Baseball Prospectus.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
We might be kind of PTSD about Cleveland,
might be.
we're both just assuming they've been scary.
Well, just we talked about PTSD with Cleveland all of last year.
Yeah, and we were right, though.
Yeah, we were right.
Detroit. Okay, yeah. Detroit, 86 last year. Here's a few things about Detroit. First of all, Tarek Skubal was the best pitcher in baseball. And they still have him. So that's a good starting point. He's up there. I said Reagan's earlier, but like he's clearly up there with Reagan's. He was better last year. I think those two are kind of similar as just dominant lefties. The best pitchers in the division. The Tigers start with that. So that's good for the Tigers. They signed Gleyber Torres to play second base. I'm intrigued by that. I think that's potentially a good power hitting middle of the order guy. And then they also did an interesting thing, which is they traded Jack Flaherty. They signed Jack Flaherty as an injury rehab guy, got a great first half from him, traded him for a couple of prospects to the Dodgers, and then re-signed him to a cheap contract.
Right.
You couldn't do better than that from a front office maneuvering standpoint.
That's a nice little do-si-do.
They also, though, signed Alex Cobb, and he's already hurt. He hasn't been healthy for like 3 years. They gave him like $15 million. I didn't really understand that at the time. And the other thing that's worth noting about them is they weren't good for most of last year.
Well, that's true.
2/3 of the way, they were like the anti-Twins.
Yeah, they went on a tear at the exact same time that the Twins absolutely fell to pieces. Right?
Halfway through last year, they were 500 or worse. They weren't particularly impressive, and then they just caught absolute fire. If you believe that that's the version of them, then you think they're going to hit the over. But at the same time, you would then have to believe that the Twins are a terrible team,
right?
Which, I'm sure there are some people who believe that. I think I'm a huge Riley Green fan. I think he is, if not already, will be very soon one of the best all-around players in the American League in their outfield. Kerry Carpenter is a great left-handed hitter, sort of a Matt Wallner-esque platoon left-handed guy who just crushes right-handed pitchers. And then they have a guy, Jackson Jobe, who's in a lot of people's mind the best pitching prospect in baseball. And I just saw this morning he's in the rotation at 21 or something like that. But they also had a number one pick a few years ago, Spencer Torkelson, who not only has been a bust so far, but is moving to the outfield, apparently, which, they tried to sign Alex Bregman and thought they had him and didn't get him.
They've swung big on some players both last two off seasons and kind of come up empty like the Blue Jays.
I was surprised. Yeah, I agree. They need like one more bat in that lineup. Bregman would have been perfect, obviously. But, if Javi Baez doesn't turn things around, he's been pretty terrible for a couple years. I feel like they're one bat short of like an actual scary lineup. So they were one of the more tricky teams in the American League. What did you predict as their
85.5?
83.5 is their over-under.
Okay.
It's tricky to me because that seems about right to me, 83.5. Above average, some question marks. Not a great team by any means, but a pretty good team. But I also could see some things going wrong from them from a depth standpoint. That
I had them at basically an 86-win team. I think they got slightly better this offseason. I think they've got enough youth to continue to give them a little bit of a boost. They're not a very old team. So I had them as an 85-win team this year. So I'm taking the over.
All right. I'll take the under on them. Just barely. I think that's about right on them. But
And that brings us to Minnesota Twins.
Yes.
Finished 82 and 82. 82 last year with an Pythag also of 82. 80. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, finished with a Pythag of 82 is what I meant. 82 wins, 82 Pythag. That disappointed Vegas, which had us at 85.5. Disappointed Gleeman and the Geek as well, because I think we both bet the over on them last year.
Yeah. Which we haven't always.
That's right.
I think more often than not we've bet the over, but not always. There's definitely been some.
And I would say objectively this offseason, they have gotten worse.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be hard to argue they've gotten better, obviously. I mean, basically, if you look at their offseason, they essentially did three things. They replaced Carlos Santana with Ty France.
Right.
They replaced Max Kepler with Harrison Bader.
Right.
And they replaced Caleb Thielbar with Danny Coulomb.
Right.
Now, a couple of those, They
Consider
Coulomb,
not-
Theobar.
yeah.
Okay, Theobar wasn't very good last year. They're both kind of middle relief lefties. Kepler wasn't particularly good last year.
Right.
And you're not really replacing Kepler with Bader. You're replacing Kepler with Wallner and Larnack in terms of starting.
We'll see how many starts Bader ends up getting.
Yeah, you seem very convinced that I don't think that's going to be right, but we'll see. But yeah, just in terms of a veteran outfielder in that mix,
right.
The Santana to France one, it's going to be extremely difficult for Ty France to provide as much value at first base as Carlos Santana did last year. Because I think you can argue that Santana was like, if not their best player, one of their 3 best players last year. He was phenomenal defensively, winning a Gold Glove or a Platinum Glove, I forget. Hit 25 homers, 110 OPS plus, 115 or something like that. I mean, he was one of their better hitters.
Yep.
He was one of their better clutch performers, and he was by far one of the best defensive players in all of baseball. That's a very tall order. I'm not saying he was an MVP candidate or anything league wide, but that Ty France got a non-guaranteed $1 million deal. If the Twins thought he had any chance of being as good as Carlos Santana, they would have given him $3 million 2 months earlier,
right,
so as to not risk not getting him. With that said, if healthy, given how good he's looked in spring training, there's certainly a level of optimism that Ty France can hit as well as Santana, or he won't be. He's stylistically very different. Santana's a switch hitter with 25 homer power, and it had extreme plate discipline. Draw a lot of walks. Ty France is see ball, hit ball. He's doubles and singles from the right side. He's not going to equal the power or the plate discipline of Santana, but he might also hit 280 instead of 240. The defensive element is where I'm curious, because Ty France's defensive numbers last year were horrendous, but also he was playing through a busted foot part of that time.
Yeah.
But also prior to that, his defensive numbers haven't been particularly good at first base.
No, they've been closer to average, though. Right.
If he's a below average defender, you're not only going to see that in terms of balls he can't get to that Santana got to, but like we talked about at the beginning with Royce Lewis in the infield, think of all the balls that Royce Lewis had throwing errors on, but then also think there were probably 3 or 4 more that he
Santana helped
saved.
out with. Right, yeah.
Same thing with Miranda. Same thing with Correa throwing those bounce throws from shortstop intentionally. That relied a lot on Santana just being a vacuum over at first base. So I wonder about that. The other thing that makes it tricky with the Twins is through 2/3 of the season, basically, or actually a little more than 2/3 of the season, mid-August, they were 70-53, which was on pace for 90-something wins.
Right.
And they had a 95% playoff odds.
Yep.
And then they went 12-27 down the stretch, including, I believe they lost 7 of their last 8, when 2 wins might have gotten them into the playoffs, or 2 more wins would have gotten them into the playoffs. Well, how do you, sort of like we talked about with Detroit, how do you judge a team that was a 90-win team for 2/3 of the season and then the worst team you've ever seen for the last third of the season?
Right. Yep.
Like, how do you blend that together from a starting point, from a clean slate, especially when it's the same team, basically, except for those 2 or 3 things that we just talked about? So this is one of the trickier Twins teams. I mean, look, we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
We've talked about bad Twins teams. We've talked about good Twins teams.
Yes.
We've talked about teams that projected to be good and were bad. We've talked about teams that projected to be bad and were really good with the Twins. This, to me, is one of the more difficult ones to confidently say, I have a good handle on what this team is, because part of me wants to think, forget the last 6 weeks where everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Right.
This team won the division in 2023, and then through 2/3 of 2024 was essentially the same team, an upper 80s, lower 90s win team. But also part of me goes, well, the last 6 weeks happened.
Yes.
A lot of the young guys had their stock deflated by that last 6 weeks, and they're just running it back with that same group. So how can you ignore the last 6 weeks? So yeah, it's a very difficult, and obviously we've talked about these themes for the last 6 months, essentially. In terms of trying to look at the roster, the bullpen, like we've talked about, projects to be the best in baseball according to Fangraphs. I would bet against that.
You'd have to bet against that almost regardless.
Right? Yeah, I mean, first of all, bullpen is the most difficult thing to predict because the samples are tiny, and one bad pitch in a clutch spot can undo 20 good innings in non-clutch spots.
Right.
But beyond that, they projected to be the number 2 bullpen last year, and they were below average last year. I'm not saying I think their bullpen is going to be bad. I think their bullpen is going to be good and has the potential to be very good. But a large percentage of the idea that they're the number 1 projected bullpen is the belief from the projection system that Johan Duran is like the second best reliever in the world. I cannot buy into that after the last 15 months of what we've seen from him, including this spring. And I've talked a ton about that. I've written about that. And I know certain people freak out about that I think I'm acting like he's terrible now. I'm not acting like he's terrible.
You drafted him.
In the MVP draft, I did.
We should also just mention that. We had a Patreon MVP draft where we went through 20 players and picked the 20 players that have drafted them.
How much WAR and WPA we think they're going to accrue, and then whoever has the better group of 10.
Yeah, so if you liked this type of episode, I would say you might want to just try to
that was a fun one.
Sign up for the Patreon. And you can hear those back episodes.
You can hear me draft Royce Lewis 6 hours before he got hurt. But that's a good example. Like, I've heard from so many people when I express worry about Duran's decreasing velocity and decreasing strikeout rate and decreasing dominance that are like, boy, you're writing him off. You think he stinks, blah, blah. Right. No. I think he's still a very good reliever. I just have a hard time assuming, which the projection systems are doing, that he's going to be a elite level top 3 in the world reliever because that is based on his multi-year track record, most of which involved him throwing 103 miles an hour.
That's right. In the same way that we have to do this with the over-under team picks, we have to.
And so, if Duran is merely very good, like he was last season, if he's the 15th best reliever in the world instead of the second best reliever in the world, that's still really good. But it makes it much more difficult for the Twins to have the best bullpen. Now you toss in the Brock Stewart question marks, who's also a big part of that projection.
Sure,
the notion that he's going to be healthy for 40 or 50 innings and dominant. Well, I wouldn't bet on that either. And Griffin Jax, oddly, is the one I would bet on, that kind of 3-headed monster. I also just think, I have no faith in Topa being healthy and as effective as he was. I think his stuff looks diminished, and he missed basically all of last season. I'm pretty high on Louis Varlin.
I am too.
I'm very high on Cole Sands. I'm reasonably still high on Jorge Alcala, and that trio I think could make up for some of the Brock Stewart and all that stuff. But as I look at the overall bullpen, I think it'll be good, but I'm not going to presume or assume it will be the best.
Sure.
And in fact, like I talked about on the Patreon a couple episodes ago, I actually think the rotation to me has more of a chance to be an elite level rotation. And that would be good for the Twins because I'd rather have the best rotation than the best bullpen, although maybe not. The question that we've talked about all offseason, and I think you maybe even have been a little more skeptical than me on it, is the overall quality and depth of this lineup.
Yep.
And, to have Lewis now out immediately doesn't help. To have lost one of your only good performing consistent hitters last year in Santana doesn't help.
When we get to the point where we've got enough injuries out there that we're like, 13 guy could be, I don't know,
Martin,
does it matter?
Gasper.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Brooks Lee being out, if that's the case, would really take a big dent out of this because then you're no longer at the point where you have a lot of depth.
Right. Yeah.
You were at the point you had a lot of depth, and now you need 2 more guys, and that exhausted that depth in the infield. Because at that point you've got Julian starting, you've got Miranda starting, you've got Castro needed everywhere. So I looked up in terms of the lineup, and again, this is similar maybe to the Duran thing. I don't think it's a bad lineup.
No.
I just wonder, can this be a top 5 lineup in the American League? And it has been near that in past years. Even last year, I think it was above average overall. Something like that. Yeah. Here's projected WRC plus, which is like an overall efficacy number for hitters, where 100 is average, 120 is good, 80 is bad, etc. Here's where the Twins rank their best hitters in terms of projected WRC plus. Their best projected hitter is Correa, who projects to be the 25th best hitter in baseball.
Okay.
Now, just from there, that's a low best hitter for a playoff contender.
Yeah, that's right.
That means 24 teams, or maybe not because there's some double ups, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay. Their second best projected hitter is Wallner,
Yep.
which is great for Wallner, and I believe in Wallner, at 44. Okay.
Okay.
Then they have Buxton at 48,
Okay.
the 48th best hitter. So, okay, 25, 44, 48. That's not
in the top 50.
that's okay.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, two of those guys are big injury question marks, and one is a platoon outfielder who's yet to play a full season in the majors. But okay, here's where I start to get a little worried. Their fourth best projected hitter is Royce Lewis at number 78, but we know he's going to miss a month at least. So what does that mean? And we also just saw him be hit 190 in the final 6 weeks of the season. Okay. Then after that, they have no one else in the top 115. Their number 5 guy is Jeffers, who projects to be the 118th best hitter in baseball.
Okay, all right.
So that's reasonable, but
Sure.
it's funny because like we're saying in a 30-team league, if your fifth guy is 120th, that's actually good, but we're not really talking about a 30-team league. We're talking about playoff
Yeah,
contention.
that's right.
Larnick, number 122. Ty France, number 126. Jose Miranda, number 136.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
so
reasonable depth for sure.
That's right. And if you've got 8 guys in the top 130, which is where that sounds pretty good. So what requires is those 4 guys to be
Correct.
to be what we want them
And
to
we
be,
already
or to get better.
Lewis is
Right.
out of for a chunk and a question mark to be that good. If, it's the same. Look, ultimately, these previews have been the same now for 3 years or whatever. That whole 300 game number that we've talked about for Buxton, Correa, and Lewis. And when we first brought that up, I actually think it was a mailbag on the Patreon where somebody suggested that as kind of an over-under. People were like, that's such a low number. But that was 3 years ago, before we've seen Buxton continue to be injured, Correa be more injured than he ever has been, and Lewis be the most injured of all of them.
Right.
They would be thrilled to get 300 games from that trio, but it's very unlikely. They were well short last year, and I think probably they'll be well short this year. If you were to get 300 games from that trio, who rank 25th, 48th, and 78th projected-wise, well, then it will be a good lineup. It won't be a great lineup, but it will be a good lineup. I just have no reason to kind of buy into that, I guess.
Well, I mean, this is what you have laid out there is an average lineup, which is fine.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily get you to the playoffs. Like, this is why we are looking at I don't know exactly. Did the Twins did you give me the over-under number for the Twins?
So
because
tied with
this is basically a low 80s type.
Tied with the Tigers.
Okay.
For first in the division
it is tied
at 83.5.
My guess was going to be that it was 85.5.
Okay. Which is what last year. 83.5. Now, like you said, this kind of to me looks like an average-ish lineup that could sink further than that with injuries. But I would expect it to be an above-average bullpen, certainly. And I think it'll be a well above-average starting rotation. Now, if you add up those things, if you have a really good rotation, a pretty good bullpen, and an average lineup, that will make the playoffs in the AL Central.
Could be.
But it might not be a 90-something win team. It'll be an 80-something win team. I also, though, think bigger, like, instead of breaking all these players down and all this stuff down, zoom out and just say they played as bad as they could have possibly played for the last 6 weeks of the season. They went 12-27. And they still ended up with 82 wins, and now the over-under is one more win than that.
Right.
So you can certainly talk yourself into going, as bad as it got, they still almost got to the over-under, so why wouldn't they beat it this time? I think that's a reasonable stance to take. You can also say, though, why is this team better than Kansas City, than Detroit, than Cleveland? I really think all these are like in the 80 to 85 win bucket, all 4 of those teams. Yeah. In part because Chicago's so bad that they're going to get some overflow wins there, some extra wins there, which we saw last year, certainly. It's funny that like this division had such a turnaround last year, going from one of the worst ever to having 4 winning teams, including 3 playoff teams, that now I think people are like, oh, the Central might be a powerhouse now. It's not.
No.
But
it's competitive as hell.
It has 4 legit average or better teams, and then it gets kind of murky because the White Sox effect inflates their win totals a little bit. But from the Twins' perspective, they destroyed the White Sox last year. You need to do that again. You can absolutely, this can be an 85, 87, 88 win. I would say 90 might be stretching it in terms of like things would have to really go well in my mind from a health standpoint and a pitching standpoint. But 83.5 is not a super high over-under. I mean, look at the other teams in this league, not even the AL Central teams that are in that range. I mean,
Toronto's to 81.5.
no, 78.5.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tampa Bay was 81.5.
Right.
Sorry.
Nobody has any faith in Tampa Bay.
Right.
Nobody knows anybody on Tampa Bay, and
Texas
they're
at
81.5.
85.5.
Yeah,
Seattle at 85.5.
83.5 is one of the lower division leading totals that you will ever see.
Oh, for sure.
And so I'm conflicted about my expectations overall, which I guess is an example of why the over-unders are a good way to frame things. Like, I don't have a ton of optimism, and I have a lot of skepticism in certain areas, and yet at the end of it, I look at 83.5 and I think, well, they could easily win more than 83. Like, why wouldn't they win 85 games? And that, to me, makes this a very tricky team to have any sort of confidence in, good or bad, like trotting into the season and going, oh, I feel like they're going to beat that, or I feel 83.5. Maybe that's like the perfect number, honestly. And so, we're not going to go preview player by player. We've talked about everyone at this point. Like you said, we just did.
If you really want a really good preview player by player, check out the Patreon episode from Monday, which was the MVP thing, where we literally went player by player, talked about why we're picking them, what we expect from them, what we think are sort of the key factors for whether or not they will achieve what they're going to achieve, all kinds of stuff.
So we've covered, I feel like we've repeated, just because there haven't been that many interesting moves and trades and stuff to talk about, we just have repeated the storylines over and over at this point. But it is weird, in the 20 years we've been writing about him and podcasting about him, there's very rarely been a team where you're like, I like the pitching, I don't really like the hitting.
Right. Yeah.
It's been pretty rare. Yeah. And I'm not saying they've had amazing lineups, but the strength of Twins teams over the last 20-something years when they've been playoff teams has generally been lineups. I mean, look at, obviously, 2019 example, but even in the Mauer-Morneau when they were winning MVPs, those lineups were really good in terms of high-end talent. And then they had like Santana and Nathan and then a bunch of like mediocre guys in the 2023 was the difference. And maybe we're seeing the blueprint for how this regime wants to build good teams is more like 2023 versus 2019, where it's like 2023 starting pitching with Lopez, Sonny Gray, and the rest. They were one of the best rotations in baseball. They had a bullpen that was at times good, but they also had the Emilio Pagan factor.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say they didn't reacquire Emilio Pagan. And then last year, they lost Sonny Gray, and it just was never the same, even though they got a good performance from Simeon Woods-Richardson. They got a good performance from Ober, but Lopez wasn't as good. Ryan wasn't available in the last 6 weeks.
And the offense sort of
And then the offense was so inconsistent at times. I mean, if it sounds like I don't have a good sense of where I want to pick, you're right.
I've got one.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm taking the under.
You're taking the under on 83.5.
And my reasoning was the same reasoning I started the conversation with.
Yeah.
They were at 82. Like, you say zoom out. I'm going to zoom out even further than you zoomed out, which was they were 82 wins last year. Like, through the crappy start, through the 12-game win streak, through the climb to the top, to the point where they had a 90-some% chance of making the postseason, to the absolute collapse, they ended up as an 82-win team.
Right. And what have they done to get better?
Nothing.
They're worse.
Right. And
they're the same.
And there's nothing that I can take last year and say, well, this is going to be better. Right. I mean, there's a lot of things where I say, I think I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about the youth, and that's why I say, depending on how this youth goes, depending on how Miranda plays, whether or not Lewis is healthy, whether or not Julian finds things,
but it's the
whether or
same
not Wallner
stuff
becomes the hitter I think he can be. Right. But yeah, I mean that's been the same thing for the last 4 years. But if those things hit, this is an 89-90 win. This could be a really good team. Right. They've certainly got the pitching in place to be able to do that. But ultimately, the number I put down for them was 81. Mm-hmm. And that's 2.5 lower than 83.5, and I'm taking the under.
But yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is, and I agree with this aspect, is if someone was in a coma for last season and the entire offseason, and you just said they went 82 and 80 last year, and their biggest move,
and their Pythag was 82 and 80, right?
And their biggest move was essentially nothing. They did nothing.
Right.
Like we said, they let Santana go and replace him with France, and on and on.
Lost Kepler, yeah.
On the most basic level, that person would go, well, I don't know, 81 and 81 or 80 and 82, like something very similar. So I get that completely. I also just think this strikes me as an extremely important season, not because they invested a lot and they signed Correa and all that. They haven't done any of that. But you have the ownership thing looming.
Yep.
I think, depending on who the new owner is, there's going to be some questions about the manager and the front office and all that stuff, just naturally. I'm not saying because of anything they've done, but just new broom sweeps clean type of thing.
Yeah.
And given the way things ended last year, if you don't win this season, and let's put winning at the very minimum have a winning record, although they didn't last year, I'll say a playoff spot. If you don't make the playoffs this year, not only do I think there's going to be open season on questioning the management of the team from a front office and in the dugout, but I think there's also going to be reason to just openly question the current core of this team and if they are what we thought they would be and what the Twins thought they would be. And by that, I mean Lewis and Miranda and Julian and Larnach and Wallner and obviously Buxton and Correa, but they're signed, so that's different. And even on the pitching side, Ober and Ryan and Lopez and like all these guys that we drafted when we were drafting the best players last week. Yeah. And even like Brooks Lee or something like that. Because what you have to determine, and we saw this 7 years ago when it was the previous core of like Polanco, Buxton, Sano, Barrios, Rosario, that group that had done some winning, but not as much as people hoped. And then they were also then being joined by what is now the core of, all these guys that I just mentioned. Except now all those guys are like 27, 28 years old. They're all at arbitration. They're no longer future. They're present. And so if you do not win with that core this year, and by doing nothing during the offseason, you've doubled down on that core in your belief in them. All these guys we mentioned, and that's not unreasonable to me. But if that core flops again collectively, then you're looking at 2026, 2027, where it's like, okay, well, now we have Emmanuel Rodriguez, we have Walker Jenkins, we have some pitching pipeline here, we have Luke Keisha, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're deciding who from this core is worthy of sticking around and being joined by that other core. And so that's why, despite the lack of offseason moves, this feels to me like a really important season. And if that's the case, it's unfortunate that they didn't do anything. Like if this is a kind of, not make or break, but like a pivot point season, then it's like, well, you should have done more than gotten Harrison Bader and whatever. But they're really doubling down on this core.
I mean, I think it's been a pivot point season for the last two seasons. They've done nothing, both of them, and that was an ownership decision. And, that's the way it works. Like, I'll let it stay. I think it's stupid, but, it's done. That's what they did.
I also, obviously, we've talked a lot about ownership, and it really tied the front office's hands, but there was an opportunity for them to make trades, and they just didn't. They didn't make a single trade. I mean, they traded for Mickey Gasper. That was really the trade they made. And so you taking the under makes me want to take the over. I mean, I really, in my head,
I hear you.
I thought 83 to 85 wins in my head. So 83.5 is a pretty damn good line from Vegas.
So you've got a 74, two-thirds chance that way.
That's why you're a math major. Okay, I'll take the over just for shits and giggles.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, S's and giggles. I forgot we're not on the Patreon. Okay, so let's quickly recap.
And we're betting on that one, right?
We always bet. We always double down on whatever our Twins pick is.
That's right.
And then pick one other AL Central team.
I'm picking Cleveland to hit the over on the 82.5 as my bet.
I
on
will
that one.
take White Sox under 54.5 and double down.
Wow.
Just because of the pleasure it will bring me if it comes true. Do you know what I mean?
I hear you.
It's just so you wake up every day.
For the same reason I didn't take the bet on the Yankees at 88.5. Like, I'm sure they hit the over, but I don't want to bet on that because I'll get no joy out of that whatsoever.
The birds singing in the background and the smell of the air is great. The sun's shining and the White Sox suck. That's what I'm going for.
So let's recap all these. Okay, let's look. I will start with the AL East, right, where we started with, Toronto, whose number is 78.5. I took the over. Aaron also took the over and bet on it. Then we had the Tampa Bay Rays, whose number is 81.5. I took the under and I bet on it. And Aaron, although I didn't feel good about that one, I just had to find a second one. And you took the over on that one. Then we had Boston. Boston's number is 86.5. You keep me honest on these over-unders.
I am.
86.5. We both took the under on 86.5. That seemed high to us both. Then up came Baltimore, whose number was also 86.5. We both took the over and we both bet on it. And then we had the Yankees coming in at 88.5. I took the over. You took the under on 88.5.
Okay.
that
So
right?
that's quite a bit of disagreement.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you took the under on the Yankees. Huh. Okay.
Well,
then,
it's like the White Sox.
I guess so. Yeah,
Makes
I
me
guess,
feel. It's like
I feel good.
It's like a great cup of coffee in the morning.
I respect it greatly. You know that.
I'm a hater from way back.
All right. We didn't start with, but the lowest one in the AL West we have as the Sacramento A's at 71.5. I took the under and I bet on it, and you took the under as well.
Yeah.
Then the Los Angeles Angels were just a game better at 72.5. I took the under, you took the over, and you bet on it.
I don't know why. I truly don't know why, but I'll stick with that.
Then we had a tie at second best or third best, 85.5 with Seattle, and you took the over and I took the over for 85.5. And then also that was tied with Texas, also 85.5. We both took the under on Texas at 85.5.
Yep.
And then Houston was only at 86.5. We both thought that was a bargain. We both took it over and we bet on it.
Okay. AL Central.
Then we get to the AL Central. By far the worst, the Chicago White Sox. They're at 54.5. I took the over on that. You took the under and you bet on it just to give yourself glee. Then we had the 82.5 Kansas City Royals, which were, we both took the over on that. Then also tied with them was the 82.5 Cleveland Guardians. We both took the over on that, and I bet on it.
Okay.
And then one game above that was the Detroit Tigers at 83.5. I took the over on that. You took the under on that. And then tied with that was the Minnesota Twins at 83.5. I took the under, and I bet on it. You took the over, and you bet on it.
Well, last year we had very similar picks. No one can accuse us of that this year.
No, that's true.
Over half of them we had different opinions on. That's good, just for intrigue.
I noticed in the AL Central, I took every team to get hit the over except the Twins.
That's interesting. There's sort of some logic in that, I suppose.
I mean, I think there is. I think once you've taken the over on 4 of them, you can't take the over on the 5th one.
Yeah, okay.
You can't do that.
It's funny. I tried to think less about the division ecosystem
Right.
this year than I have in past years, and I tried to really just focus on individual teams and not try to chip away at an opinion I had about a team.
Sure.
Because I wanted to fit in kind of the narrative of the division. So we'll see if that works out or not for me. But those are our over-under picks for the season. Just so you guys remember, when the Twins perform well, it was me who had faith in them. When they perform, and John was the hater.
That's right. Yep.
Just keep that in mind. The so-called Twins geek, Mr. Optimistic, thinks they're going to stink this year is really the point to me. If you've made it through these whole 2 hours
correct.
here. We will be back on the Patreon side. We would love to have you join us. It is now
early next week, Tuesday probably.
Yeah.
Basically, whenever the final rosters get announced, we'll be on it. And
we have some interesting things planned for the Patreon because now it is a kind of one-size-fits-all pricing for the Patreon.
Yes.
And so we are now incentivized more than ever to include as much value in that as possible. And in fact, I have an idea for just a couple of days from now where I'm going to include something that hopefully people enjoy. So we would love to have you join us.
$8 a month. I think it already is.
$2 a week, basically.
Right.
And you will get on average 2 new episodes a week that are different than the free show. Yeah. Commercial free, deeper dives, post-game stuff, all that.
Before it was $1 an episode, but during the season, we do 8 to 11 to 12 episodes.
Save money on it.
Yeah, you will end up saving money this way.
So we'd love to have you join us. Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. If you like this show and you'd like 3 episodes per week instead of 1 per week, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/Gleeman and join us. Otherwise,
thank our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsors who make this show free.
Yeah, RotoWire and Prize Picks and Factor Meals and BetterHelp. And a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. It's now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. Stop by your favorite liquor store on the Black Stack Tap Room or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or try something new. I would suggest stopping by that Black Stack Tap Room this Thursday for the opening day Twins watch party versus St. Louis Cardinals. We're here, kids. We're at the thing. We will be back with a free episode in 2 weeks. There will not be one,
which is more reason to join the Patreon.
We'll be doing a Patreon midweek as we get the final rosters, and then probably one right after opening day to kind of break down that first game and what we saw.
Come join the Patreon. You like the show? It would be a nice way to support us and also just get you a whole lot more episodes that hopefully you'll enjoy.
Ad-free episodes. Yep.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.
Gleeman